My name is Kai Harada. I'm 18 years old, and right now I'm sitting on the deck of the cruise ship Pacific Star watching my favorite show on my phone. Music is pounding all around me. 300 people, the entire graduating class from all four sections, dancing, drinking, shouting, taking photos against the backdrop of the ocean. Meiji Gakuin Academy, one of the most expensive private schools in Tokyo, organized a graduation trip that people will talk about for years. A 3-day cruise on an actual liner in the Pacific Ocean. Pool, restaurants, dance floor, cabins with balconies. The parent committee chipped in. The sponsors added more. The principal signed off. The route: depart Yokohama, head south past the Izu Islands, reach the Ogasawara Islands and return. 4 days of open Pacific. I don't care about any of it. Not because I'm rude or ungrateful. Because I'm sitting in a deck chair at the stern, away from everyone, with headphones in my ears. And Bear Grylls is showing how to start a fire on a wet tropical island, using the dry core of a coconut palm. And that is 1,000 times more interesting than any party. Ultimate survival, my show, my life. I didn't just watch it. I studied it, with a notebook, with pauses, with rewinds. I knew how to make fire in the wild. 7 different ways: friction bow drill, pump drill, flint and steel, lens focus, battery and foil, dry bamboo, even chocolate and a tin can. I knew how to find water where there wasn't any. Collect condensation from leaves at dawn, dig a beach well 3 meters from salt water, build a solar still from a pit and plastic sheeting, track the birds and insects that always fly toward water. I knew how to build shelter, lean-to from branches, tree platform, palm leaf cover, windbreak. I knew how to hunt, snares from cord, spear with fire-hardened tip, fish by hand in the shallows, grubs under the bark of dead trees. On top of all that, I read a lot. I knew every species of venomous snake in Southeast Asia by scale pattern. I knew which tropical insects were dangerous and which were the best source of protein. I knew the behavior of wild boar, monkeys, crocodiles. I knew which berries were edible, which leaves treated wounds, which roots stopped hunger. I was a genuine obsessive about wilderness survival. Classmates thought it was strange. My mother said, "Kai, what do you need this for? You live in Tokyo." Teachers sighed. I didn't care. I believed, prepared for anything. Bear Grylls on the screen cracks a coconut against a rock, drinks the milk and says to the camera, "On a desert island, your biggest enemy isn't hunger, and it isn't predators. Your biggest enemy is panic. If you can control fear, you can survive anywhere." I nod, like he's talking directly to me. Then I take out my headphones, put my phone in my pocket, and walk to the dance floor. Akane Fujimori, the girl I've been secretly in love with since 10th grade, is standing at the railing with a glass of juice, looking at the stars. I want to go over to her. As always, my feet don't cooperate. Instead, I end up next to Takuya Matsuda, who is dancing in the middle of the crowd, and I pretend I'm having a good time. And for a while, I actually am. The music is loud. The deck vibrates. The ocean is black and endless beyond the railing. The ship's lights reflect in the water like scattered stars. Beautiful, I smile. The evening winds down. Around 11, the duty teachers start herding everyone to their cabins. The ship is swaying slightly more than during the day, but nobody pays attention. I go down to the lower deck to my cabin, the cheapest one, interior, no window, the one nobody wanted. And that ended up mine because I registered last. Bunk, nightstand, tiny bathroom. I lie down without getting undressed, close my eyes, fall asleep, and wake up from an impact. Not sound impact. My whole body jolts. The ceiling goes left. The wall becomes the floor. I roll off the bunk and hit my shoulder on the nightstand. In the corridor screaming. Not one voice, dozens. The howl of an alarm. Emergency lighting strobing red. The floor beneath me tilts, slowly but unmistakably. The ship is listing. I get out into the corridor. Water, coming from somewhere below. Not gushing, not spraying, but rising. The way a tide rises. Dark, cold, already to my ankles. People running, some in pajamas, some barefoot. Someone dragging a suitcase that serves no purpose. Teacher Nishimura is shouting, "Everyone up, lifeboats." His voice cracks. I run for the stairs. Water to my knees now on the stairwell. A crush. Someone falls. Someone steps on them. I push through, shove a shoulder out of the way, break out onto the upper deck. Outside is chaos. Night, rain, wind strong enough to knock you sideways. Waves, black, massive, 4 to 5 meters, breaking over the railing. The ship is listing maybe 20 degrees, and the list is increasing. I watch a lifeboat being lowered on the port side. It swings into the hull, capsizes, and the wave takes it into the dark. Screaming, people jumping into the water. Someone holding the railing, someone praying, someone just standing and staring, not understanding what's happening. I don't understand either. I'll find out later if I survive. The storm formed in hours from two colliding atmospheric fronts. The meteorological service issued the warning too late. The ship took a direct hit from a rogue wave, a single wave 12 meters tall that breached the hull below the waterline. The watertight bulkheads failed. The engines cut out. Communications lost. 30 minutes from normal to gone. But right now, I know none of this. I know one thing: the deck is leaving from under me, and I need something that will keep me on the surface. I see the lifebuoy rack at the entrance to the bridge. I run for it. The deck is wet, angled, slick. I fall, get up, fall again, reach it on my hands and knees. I grab a ring, large, orange, Pacific Star stenciled on the side, pull it over my head, cinch the straps. The ship shudders deep through its whole structure like a dying animal. The deck drops sharply. I'm airborne, railing, hull, air, and then water. Black, freezing, salt. It takes me under, a few seconds below the surface. Then the ring pulls me back. I get air into my lungs. A wave lifts me to a crest, and from the crest I see the ship last time. Pacific Star, 200 meters of steel and glass and light, is sinking. The bow is already under. The stern is lifted high, and things are falling from it. Chairs, luggage, life rafts, people. The lights are still on. Yellow, bright as Christmas. And they go under row by row, deck by deck, slowly in without stopping. The lights on the mast are last. Then darkness and the roar of the ocean. I shout, call for anyone. Anyone at all. Waves throw me up and down. I hear voices, distant, broken, then they go quiet. One by one, silence, only wind, waves, and rain. How long I was in the water, I don't know. Maybe an hour, maybe 5. Maybe the whole night. I lost track of time, lost the sense of my own body. The cold took it. I just held the ring and breathed. Inhale, wave. Exhale, wave. Inhale, exhale, inhale. I come to on the beach, face in the sand, wet, cold, with the taste of salt and blood in my mouth. The ring is beside me. I never let go. The wave threw us in together. I roll onto my back. The sky is bright blue without a single cloud. The sun is high. The air is hot, wet, heavy, tropical. Somewhere birds are calling sharp, unfamiliar. I sit up slowly and look. Beach, a narrow strip of white sand, and behind it, jungle, real jungle, dense, dark green, impenetrable. A wall of trees, lianas, shrubs climbing the hillside. Coconut palms with heavy crowns. I recognize them immediately. Bear showed them dozens of times. Mangrove growth at the water's edge. Massive ferns in the shade. Sounds, birds, insects, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of running water. Smell, soil, rotting leaves, flowers, salt, life. I look around. The beach curves in both directions, bending behind rocky headlands. Behind me, the ocean, calm, turquoise, as if last night's storm didn't happen. Not one ship on the horizon, not one track in the sand except mine, not one building, antenna, or utility pole. An uninhabited island. I had no way of knowing where I was. The ship was heading for the Ogasawara Islands, but the storm could have pushed me hundreds of kilometers off course. The Kuroshio current is powerful. It could have carried me toward the Marianas, toward Micronesia, anywhere in the Western Pacific. Without a map, without a compass, without a phone. It's on the bottom of the ocean with my cabin. I can't determine coordinates. I'm 18 years old. I'm alone on an unknown island. No food, no water, no tools, no communication. 300 people were on that ship. My classmates, teachers, crew. I don't know if anyone else survived. I don't know if anyone is looking for me. I don't know if they'll find me. Panic rises. I feel it closing my throat. Feel my breathing go fast and shallow. Feel my hands start shaking. And then a voice in my head. Calm, businesslike, familiar. Not a hallucination, just memory. Bear Grylls. For the 1000th time, as if sitting beside me, your biggest enemy is panic. I close my eyes. Take a breath. Long, slow, let it out. Again, the panic doesn't leave, but it steps back. Gives me room to think. I open my eyes and stand up. My legs are shaking, but I'm standing. The only thing I know for certain is that surviving is possible anywhere. I've spent my entire life learning that. Every evening, every episode, every book, every article. Everyone laughed. My mother sighed. My teachers shook their head, and now I'm standing barefoot on white sand, on an uninhabited Pacific island, and everything separating me from dying is knowledge that everyone called useless. My mouth is desert dry. My eyes find a coconut palm, heavy with fruit. The lowest cluster maybe 4 meters up. I take off my belt, loop it around the trunk and my lower back the way Bear showed on the Borneo episode. Lean into it and walk my feet up the bark. It's harder than it looks on television. My arms burn at the 2-meter mark and I stop, breathe, keep going. I reach the cluster and twist 2 coconuts free. I climb down and open the first one with my pocket knife. I always carry it. Always. A habit my mother called pointless for 3 years. Prying a hole through the soft eye at the base. The coconut water comes out cold and slightly sweet, and I drink all of it without stopping. The strength that comes back is immediate and specific. Not a rush. Just the feeling of a system that was shutting down being told it doesn't have to yet. I look at the beach. Clean sand in both directions. Visible from the water. Visible from the air. I spend 20 minutes arranging rocks and driftwood and dark seaweed into 3 large letters above the tide line. SOS. If anyone is searching, they'll know the island has a survivor. I'm about to walk into the jungle when I see it in the wet sand at the water's edge. A plastic bottle, half buried. Label long gone. I pick it up and turn it over in my hands. Clear plastic. No cracks. Still holds its shape. I know exactly what this is for. On a cloudy day, it's a water container. On a clear day, filled with water, it's a lens that can start a fire. I pocket the bottle next to the knife. First rule of extreme survival, there's no such thing as garbage. There's only material you haven't figured out how to use yet. I turn toward the tree line and walk in. The coconut water is gone in 30 minutes. Not even 30. I drink the second one too fast. Tilt the shell back until the last drops hit my tongue. And then there's nothing left. My throat is already asking for more. I look at the 2 empty shells in my hands and do the math. The sun is maybe 4 hours past noon, which means I've been awake since morning on a beach with 0 fresh water. And the ocean around me is 40 million square kilometers of the most useless liquid on Earth. Rule of 3. No air, 3 minutes. No water, 3 days. No food, 3 weeks. I have until the day after tomorrow before my body starts seriously breaking down. That's the clock. I stand up, brush sand off my knees, and think. Bear always said, when you need water, don't wander randomly. Watch what moves. Birds and insects don't fly in straight lines unless they're going somewhere specific, and the place they're going is almost always water. I watch. It takes maybe 4 minutes. A cluster of small dark birds, the kind I don't have a name for, cuts out of the tree line in a low purposeful arc to the north, not circling, not hunting, going somewhere. I follow them on foot, staying at the edge of the jungle where the ground is firmer than the wet sand, but the canopy hasn't fully closed over me yet. 400 meters, maybe a little more. The ground slopes slightly downhill and gets softer under my shoes, and then I hear it, a thin trickling sound just past a wall of broad-leafed ferns. I push through a stream, barely wider than my arm span, maybe 15 centimeters deep at its center, running over smooth, dark stones. I kneel and look at it properly. The water is moving. That's good. Still water grows things that will wreck your stomach, but it's cloudy, brownish. Tannins from the leaf litter upstream probably, or just sediment from last night's storm. Drinking it like this is a gamble I can't afford to take. I need fire first. I cut back to the beach, grab the plastic bottle, and fill it from the stream on the way back to my camp spot, which right now is just a patch of higher ground near the tree line where I left the life preserver. I hold the bottle up toward the sun. The principle is simple. A water-filled plastic bottle acts as a convex lens. Focus the refracted light onto a dark piece of tinder, and you get enough heat to ignite it. Bear demonstrated this 3 times across different episodes. I watched all 3. I wrote it down. The problem is the sky. It's not overcast exactly, but there's a thin layer of high cloud sitting between me and the sun, just enough to scatter the light, just enough to kill the focal point. I spend 12 minutes moving the bottle at different angles, watching the bright circle of concentrated light wander across a piece of dried palm fiber on the ground. It gets warm, it does not catch. I put the bottle down. Backup plan. The bow drill. I know this method well enough to teach it, theoretically. You need 4 components. A fireboard, a spindle, a bow, and a handhold. The spindle spins inside a notch carved in the fireboard. Friction generates heat. Heat generates coal. Coal ignites tinder. What I actually have my belt, which I unbuckle and strip down to the inner cord, about 1.5 meters of usable cordage, a straight dry branch about as thick as my thumb, which I find in 2 minutes under a fallen palm, a curved piece of green wood for the bow, flexible but strong enough, and a flat section of bamboo root for the fireboard, which I split with my knife and dry in the sun for 20 minutes before I truss it. The tinder is coconut fiber. I scrape it from the inner husk until I have a loose nest the size of my fist. Bear specifically said coconut fiber on at least 2 episodes. I remember first attempt. The spindle jumps out of the notch on my 4th stroke. I've carved the notch too shallow. Recarve. Deeper this time, angled at 45 degrees. Second attempt, I get smoke. Real smoke, a thin gray thread rising from the notch. I stroke harder. The smoke thickens. My left hand is pressing the handhold down onto the spindle tip, and my right arm is sawing the bow back and forth. and my thighs are burning from the squat position, and then the smoke stops because my bow arm runs out of momentum and I lose the rhythm. No coal. Third attempt. I reset everything, check the notch, check the tinder nest position, lock my left wrist against my shin for stability. Bear said that brace your wrist against your leg or you'll wobble, and I start stroking. Slow first, build pressure, then faster. Smoke comes up almost immediately this time. I keep going. My right arm is on fire. The smoke goes from gray to white to dark, and something in the notch glows orange-red when I tilt the board. To look, I tip the coal onto the tinder nest, cup it in both hands and blow. Slow and steady, the nest smolders, smoke pours between my fingers. I blow again. A small tentative flame catches at the center of the nest, and I lower it carefully onto my pre-laid pile of dry sticks and hold my breath. It takes. I sit back on my heels and look at the fire. 45 minutes. Bear Grylls does this in 3. I know because I've watched him do it. Check the timestamp. Watched it again. 3 minutes flat. Calm expression. Slight smile at the camera. My right palm has a blister forming at the base of my index finger where the bow cord ran. My thighs ache. My mouth is completely dry. Theory and practice, I say out loud to no one. Not the same thing at all. The fire is burning. Now I need a vessel to boil water in. I have no pot, no can, no metal container of any kind. What I have is the jungle. I look around for bamboo and find it immediately. There's a stand of it about 30 meters in, thick-stemmed, the kind with natural closed nodes every half meter or so. I cut a section with my knife. One node forms a sealed bottom. The top is open. I've got a container roughly the size of a large travel mug. It won't last forever. Bamboo will eventually crack from repeated heating, but it will work today. The second option is the hot stone method, which I use for the larger quantity. I dig a shallow depression in the earth near the fire, line it with the biggest waxy leaves I can find, layered 3 deep, and fill it with stream water. Then I use 2 sticks as tongs to move fist-sized stones that have been sitting in the fire for 20 minutes directly into the water. The hissing is immediate. Steam rises. After the 4th stone, the water is rolling at a boil. I watch it for 2 full minutes before I take it off the heat. It cools while I build up the fire and cut a second bamboo section, wider this time, for storage. I now have 2 containers. Not enough, I'll need more. But for today, it's enough. I drink slowly, in small sips, even though every cell in my body wants to tilt my head back and pour. Dehydration plus fast intake equals cramps. I know this. I drink slowly. The water tastes like nothing. It is the best thing I've ever had. The snake almost kills me while I'm looking for tinder. I need dry material, really dry, bone dry, the kind that catches from a spark without any persuasion. The best source is usually the sheltered space beneath the root systems of large fallen trees, where rain doesn't reach and the bark dries out completely over time. I find a good candidate, a massive tree that came down maybe a season ago, roots lifted out of the ground, leaving a dark cave of dry earth and dead wood underneath. I crouch down and push my hand into the gap under the root mass. Something cold touches my fingers. I pull my hand back, fast, without thinking. Pure reflex, 15 centimeters from my fingertips. Emerging from the dark in a slow, unhurried extension is a triangular head, green-yellow scales. The pattern is a series of irregular darker diamonds along the dorsal line. The eyes are vertical slit. Heat-sensing pits between nostril and eye on each side. Trimeresurus flevoviridis, Okinawan habu, pit viper, hemotoxic venom. Fast-acting. Without treatment, a bite to the hand can cause tissue necrosis within hours, systemic hemorrhage within days. There's no treatment on this island. I know this species. I know it from 4 separate sources. 2 books, 1 documentary, 1 field guide I read, cover to cover on a rainy Saturday when I was 15. I know the scale pattern, the head shape, the hunting behavior, the venom composition, the first aid protocols. I know that pit vipers are ambush predators and do not generally pursue threats that retreat. I back away, slowly. No sudden movements. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The snake doesn't follow. It holds its position, tongue flickering, and then withdraws back into the dark. I sit down on the ground 6 meters away and stay there for 2 minutes. My hands are shaking, not a little properly shaking, the kind where I have to press my palms flat against my thighs to make them stop. My heart is doing something loud and uneven in my chest. The adrenaline is so sharp it tastes metallic. I knew that species. I knew the behavior. I knew it probably wouldn't strike if I retreated. Probably. Theory doesn't turn off fear, I say. Same voice I used before. Still no one to hear it. Knowing it and living through it are completely different things. I mark the tree in my memory. The snake's home is a resource I'm not ready to use yet. But I might be later. A pit viper that size has venom glands worth keeping. By the time the light starts going orange, This is what I have. Fire, burning, fed, sustainable, as long as I keep feeding it. Good. Water 2 bamboo containers, boiled, cooling, enough for tonight and tomorrow morning. Container 2 bamboo sections, need more. Tools, my knife. The bow drill I can now actually use. Belt cord 1.5 meters, both coconut shells as shallow bowls. Food, nothing today, except the coconut water this morning. 3 remaining coconut pieces, roughly 400 calories total. Enough for tonight, not enough for tomorrow. Shelter, I spend the last hour of light building a proper windbreak. 3 long poles leaned against a living tree at 45 degrees, covered with layers of overlapping palm fronds like roof tiles. It won't keep out serious rain, but it keeps the wind off, and the ground underneath stays dry. 1 hour of work. I've slept in worse, probably. Well, I haven't, but the version of me who watched 300 hours of survival programming thinks he could. I sit by the fire and eat the first coconut piece slowly, chewing more than necessary because my stomach is convinced I'm giving it more than I am. Somewhere offshore, something breaks the surface of the water. A fish, a dolphin maybe. I don't turn to look. I add wood to the fire, pull my knees up. Listen. At some point after full dark, I hear it. A heavy sound in the undergrowth to the east. Not constant. Moving. Something large, unhurried, circling at maybe 20 meters. I hear the snapping of a branch. A soft grunting exhale, then silence, then the circling again. It comes twice more before I stop hearing it, and eventually sleep. In the morning, I find the tracks, cloven hooves, deep impressions the animal was heavy. The stride is wide. There are 2 separate sets looping around the perimeter of my camp in overlapping arcs. One set of tracks goes right up to my windbreak, close enough that the animal could have reached the palm fronds with its snout, and then turns away. A boar, a big one. It came, it checked me out, and it left. For now, I hear it before I see it. I'm clearing the ground around my camp, hacking back the undergrowth with my knife, widening the area so I have a clear sight line to every approach. It's the kind of work that doesn't require thought, which means my brain keeps wandering to the things I'm trying not to think about. 300 people on that ship. Classmates, teachers, whether anyone found the SOS on the beach. Whether anyone is looking, I hack another branch. Stay on the work. That's when I hear it coming from somewhere in the dense shrubs about 8 meters to my left. Not a bird call, not an insect. Something lower, more irregular. A sort of rough, broken clicking, like a throat that can't quite decide whether it's breathing or talking. I push through the bush. It's a parrot. A big one. Easily 30 centimeters from beak to tail. Green plumage with a red-orange chest and a scattering of deep blue in the tail feathers. I recognize the species immediately. The Eclectus ruratus. Eclectus parrot, distributed across the Pacific Island chains. I've seen them in documentaries about New Guinea and the Solomons. In those documentaries, they're always loud and quick and impossible to catch. This one is sitting on the ground. The left wing hangs wrong, not folded against the body like the right one, but drooping slightly outward. The joint sitting too low. The left foot is dark with dried blood around the lower leg. Whatever happened? A fall. A predator that got a grip and then lost it. Happened recently enough that the blood hasn't fully crusted over. The bird looks at me. It doesn't panic. Doesn't scramble backward or try to bite. It just sits there, tilts its head slightly to the left, and watches me with one bright, completely calm eye. I stand there for a moment and run the numbers. A bird this size is probably 400 grams of meat. Maybe a little more protein. Calories. Something I genuinely need right now. I've had coconuts and boiled stream water and nothing else for 2 days, and my body is starting to notice. But I also think about Bear, not a specific episode, just something he said across several of them. Psychological degradation is the silent killer in long-term survival situations. It doesn't announce itself the way hunger or dehydration does. It just starts quietly dismantling your decision-making, your will to keep working, your sense that any of it matters. And the thing that slows it down, more than almost anything else, is having something to take care of. The parrot tilts its head the other way, still watching me. Fine, I say, but you're not gonna like the next part. The splint takes me 40 minutes. I find 2 thin straight slivers of dry bamboo about the length of my finger, smooth them with my knife until they won't snag, and pad them with a layer of chewed palm fiber. The fiber is soft enough to not cut into the wing, but firm enough to hold position. The trick is immobilizing the joint without compressing the blood vessels, which I know in theory, and now have to actually do on a small struggling bird that I'm holding with my left hand while working with my right. The bird does not like this. It screams, not a chirp or a squawk. A full piercing scream that probably carries 50 meters in every direction. I wince and keep going. The binding is thin strips of palm fiber, wound tight enough to hold but not so tight that the wing loses circulation. I check the wrap 3 times before I'm satisfied. The foot I clean with seawater. I cup some in my palm and let it run over the wound. More screaming. The blood loosens and rinses away, and the cut underneath is shallow, already beginning to seal on its own. I set the bird down. It glares at me for a long moment, then shakes itself all over, tests the splinted wing once with a careful half extension, and makes a short, disgusted sound. I know, I say. I wouldn't like it either. I catch 2 small fish from the stream using my hands. It takes an hour and a half, and I only succeed because the water is shallow enough in one rocky section that the fish have nowhere to accelerate away from me. I cut one into small strips and put it in front of the parrot. It ignores the fish for 10 minutes, ignores me for 10 more, and then eats every piece. I name him Ao, Japanese for blue because of the tail feathers. I don't analyze this decision very hard. By the second day I figured out that Ao has a specific sound for the boar. I hear it for the first time at dusk. A low, rapid clicking, 3 beats, almost like something mechanical. Ao is perched on a root beside me, completely still, facing the eastern undergrowth. I stop what I'm doing and listen. 30 seconds later, I hear the boar, that heavy snapping, grunting movement in the brush, the same sound from the first night. The boar passes maybe 30 meters out and keeps going. Ao made the sound 20 seconds before I heard anything. I file this away carefully. That's 20 seconds of warning I didn't have before. On the 3rd day, I understand how important that is. I'm on the trail. Not on it exactly. I've been following it parallel, 20 to 30 meters into the jungle on the western side, trying to map where it goes without walking on it directly. The trail is old but maintained, not by animals. The cuts on the overhanging branches are too clean, the ground too consistently clear of debris. Someone walks this path regularly. I've been telling myself it's probably nothing. Fishermen who come seasonally and leave. Old infrastructure from when this island was mapped and occupied, and then abandoned again. I've been half convincing myself. Ao makes the sound, not the boar sound, a different one. 2 short, sharp notes, almost like a short whistle bitten off at the end. I've never heard this one before. I stop immediately, drop into a crouch, and press in behind the root buttress of the nearest large tree. I wait for almost a minute. Nothing. Then I hear it, not sound exactly, more like a change in the quality of the silence. The birds stop. The insects shift frequency. Something that belongs here passes through, and the jungle acknowledges it. 2 figures come through the brush on the trail. Men moving at a steady, unhurried pace. The way people move through terrain, they know completely. Dark skin, weathered, the kind of build that comes from a lifetime of physical work. Cloth wraps at the waist. Bare feet. Each one carries a long-hafted spear with a pale, slightly curved point. Bone, I think, from the color and texture. No metal, no fabric beyond the waist wraps. They're not fishermen who come seasonally. They stop on the trail, maybe 15 meters from where I'm crouching. One of them says something low, gestures north. The other responds, looks around once, a slow, scanning look, the kind an experienced tracker does automatically. And then they keep moving, heading north along the trail. In 60 seconds, they're out of sight. I don't move for 2 full minutes. I count my heartbeat instead of seconds, because I don't trust myself to count properly right now. When I get to somewhere around 140, I slowly, carefully rise from behind the root and back away from the trail, through the densest part of the undergrowth, stepping on roots and stones wherever possible. Ao shifts on my shoulder, makes the same 2-note sound again, quieter. Yeah, I whisper. I know. Here's what I know. If I had been walking on that trail when they came through, I would have been standing in the open with a knife and a bamboo spear I made this morning, and they had real weapons and walked like they'd been moving through jungle since before they could speak. A broken parrot with a splinted wing and a blood-crusty foot just saved my life. I moved the camp the same evening, 200 meters deeper into the interior, underneath a rock overhang that juts out from the base of the ridge. It's not a cave, more like a shelf of stone that keeps the rain off a patch of ground 5 meters wide and 3 deep. The trees in front of it are dense enough that the space beneath the overhang isn't visible from more than 10 meters away. The SOS on the beach stays. I need rescuers to see it. And rescuers come from the water, not the jungle. But I change how I make fire. I dig a pit, 30 centimeters deep, 50 wide line, the bottom with flat stones, and burn inside it. The walls contain most of the glow. Over the pit, I build a frame of green branches with leaves layered across it like a diffuser. The smoke breaks up as it rises and scatters before it clears the canopy. From a trail 20 meters away, there's nothing to see. The entrance to the camp I seal with a curtain of hanging liana. Long looping vines that look from the outside like they've been growing there for years. I walk to the water by stepping on exposed rocks along the stream bank, rather than beating a path through the undergrowth. Tracks on stone wash away in rain, tracks in soft earth don't. Then I sit down and make a spear. I cut a section of bamboo 2 meters long and as thick as 2 fingers pressed together, At the top end, I split the bamboo lengthwise into 4 sections, about 20 centimeters deep. Careful cuts with my knife, keeping the splits even. Into the gap I fit a stone point I've napped from a piece of flint I found at the base of the overhang. Not beautiful, not symmetric, but it has an edge that draws blood when I test it on my thumb. I wedge the stone into the split ends, splay them slightly around it, and bind the whole thing with palm fiber wound, tight and even. Then I find a small pine, close enough, something that weeps sap, and work the thick amber resin into the binding with a stick, packing it into every gap. I drive the tip into a tree trunk, medium force. The stone holds. I do it again, harder. The stone holds. I lean the spear against a rock wall and look at it. Tomorrow I'll know if the sap cured properly overnight. Tonight I eat the second fish, share 3 pieces with Ao, and sit with my back against the overhang wall and listen to the jungle settle into its nighttime sounds. Somewhere out there, those 2 men are sleeping in a place I haven't found yet. They know this island the way I know the layout of my parents' apartment automatically without thinking, and I've been here 4 days. In the morning I think about this while I press my thumb against the binding on the spear. The stone doesn't move. Good. It's something. It's not enough, but it's something the spear held overnight. I check the binding first thing in the morning, press the stone point sideways, then pull it, then drive the tip hard into the base of the overhang wall. The resin has set completely. The stone doesn't shift by a millimeter. It's not a sophisticated weapon, but it's real, and it's mine, and I feel meaningfully less exposed holding it than I did yesterday with only the knife, which is the right feeling to have, because today I'm going to find out where those 2 men came from. I follow the trail parallel the way I did before, 30 meters into the jungle on the western side, moving through the undergrowth slowly enough that I don't make more noise than the ambient sounds of the forest. Ao rides my shoulder for the first 100 meters, then transfers to a branch overhead, and follows by flying short distances between trees. He's figured out the system, apparently. He stays close and he stays quiet. The trail goes north for about 1 kilometer before it starts climbing. The ground rises in a series of shallow steps, the kind of terrain that means there's a ridge ahead. The undergrowth thins as the elevation increases, and the soil gets stonier, and around a long curve of the hillside I stop, drop to one knee, and look. The village sits on a flattened section of the ridge, maybe 40 meters wide and 60 long. 15, maybe 18 structures. I count twice and get different numbers, because some of them are partially obscured by others. The construction is consistent. Vertical poles for walls, roofs thatched with the same broad leaves I've been using for my own shelter, elevated slightly off the ground on short posts. Around the whole perimeter runs a palisade of sharpened stakes, the points angled outward, each one about 2 meters tall. There's a single opening on the south face, a gap maybe 2 meters wide with 2 heavy horizontal poles that can be lifted in or out. On the platform of a large tree just inside the palisade north corner, there's a man sitting, watching the jungle below. 35, maybe 40 people total. I watch for 90 minutes and keep a rough count of everyone I see moving. Men with weapons, spears, bows. The bows are bamboo strung with something that might be sinew or plant fiber, and they carry them casually. The way you carry something you've used every day for your entire life. The spear points and arrowheads are pale colored, the surfaces slightly irregular, bone and obsidian, no metal anywhere. I watch the sentry in the tree rotate out and a new one take his position. I check the time by the sun's position. Then I wait. 2 hours later the sentry rotates again, same replacement interval, give or take 10 minutes. I note it. Systematic, not casual. These people run a real security rotation. I shift my position to get a better angle on the southeast corner of the palisade. There's a separate structure there, smaller than the others, lower to the ground, built from heavier poles set closer together. More like a pen than a house. There's a gap in the palisade wall at this corner, where 2 of the stakes have leaned outward with age. Their base is rotting in the ground. Nobody seems to have fixed it. Either they haven't noticed or they don't think anything's getting through. I look at the pen. Someone is inside it, sitting, knees pulled up, head slightly bowed. I watch for 2 full minutes to confirm yes, a person, alive, because they shift position slowly while I watch, wearing something that catches what little light reaches the corner. I change my position again, edging further around the hillside to the east, working slowly and taking 10 minutes to cover 30 meters so I don't disturb anything. From the new angle, the light is better for about 20 seconds when the canopy shifts in a breeze. A white shirt. The Meiji Gakuin crest on the breast pocket, blue piping at the... I know that shirt. I wore that shirt 4 days ago. I stay on the hillside for another 2 hours. I count the sentry rotations one more time, 3 in a row, all consistent. At night the frequency will probably drop 1 sentry, maybe 2 covering the gate. The southeast corner, with its rotten stakes and its proximity to the tree shadows, is almost certainly unwatched. I note where the cooking fires are, There are 3 in the center of the compound, and where the fires died down. Soonest in the evening. Southeast corner is the furthest from all 3. The pen gate is bound with rope, thick rope, plant fiber twist, multiple wraps. A knife will go through it, but not fast. The jungle between the village and my camp, I've walked it 3 times now. I know where the ground is soft, where there are roots to trip over, where the undergrowth is thick enough to slow you down. I know one route that's faster than the others if you know exactly where to put your feet. I start walking back. I have until dark to prepare. It's not enough time, and it's also all the time there is. The preparation takes 4 hours. First, rope. I braid 3 meters of liana into a 2-strand twist, testing the strength as I go. Liana is not ideal. It's too stiff for fine work and it'll dry out within a few days. But it's strong enough for what I need right now, which is to have something in my hands when I'm inside that compound. Second, torches. 2 of them, made from green branches with dried fiber bound at the top, soaked in animal fat. 4 days ago I killed a small mammal, something like a large rat, that I found raiding my food store, and I rendered the fat in a bamboo section over the fire. It's not much, maybe a tablespoon's worth, but enough to get 2 torches burning for several minutes each. I won't light them unless I absolutely have to, but I need to have them. Third, a tripwire. I go back toward the village, not all the way, just far enough to find the section of trail where the path narrows between 2 large root buttresses, the natural choke point where anyone running from the village toward my camp would have to pass through at a run. I stretch a length of liana cord across the trail at shin height, tied to each root at exactly the point where it won't be visible in darkness. Above it, suspended from a branch with a quick-release knot, I hang 4 heavy stones in a loose bundle. The mechanism is simple. Hit the cord at running speed. The knot releases. The stones fall onto the hardroot surface. In the dark, moving fast, it sounds like the world is collapsing on both sides of you simultaneously. Whether it stops anyone depends on how disciplined they are under stress. I'm betting they're human. Fourth, I eat. I force myself to eat a full portion of the dried meat, even though my stomach has no interest in food right now. Whatever happens tonight, I need to be moving efficiently for the next several hours, and that requires fuel in the system. Ao watches me eat from his position on the root above the fire pit. He tilts his head. I'll be back, I tell him. It feels slightly ridiculous to say it. I say it anyway. Around what I estimate is midnight, I start moving. The north face of the hill is steeper than the trail approach. It takes me 20 minutes to cover 150 meters, placing each foot deliberately, stopping every time I dislodge a stone. Ao is back at camp. He can't help me here, and his signals would carry. The sentry in the tree platform is a silhouette against the sky. I can see him from below, which means he can see the slope below him if he looks directly down. I give the tree a wide berth, come around to the east, and approach the palisade from an angle that keeps a cluster of 3 large ferns between me and the sentry's eye line. The rotten stake is exactly where I remembered it. 2 of them, actually. The left one rotten at the base, the right one cracked halfway up. I press my hand flat against the left one and push, slowly, steadily, no jerking movements. It shifts. I push more. It grinds against the packed earth. A sound like a very slow exhale. I freeze, count to 30. The sentry hasn't moved. I push again. The stake tilts outward, the rod at the base giving way, and there's a gap wide enough to turn sideways and slide through. Inside the palisade, I stay low and move along the inner wall, keeping the stake tips above my head. The pen is 20 meters away, in the far corner. The nearest cooking fire has burned down to orange coals. The village is asleep. I can hear breathing from the nearest structure, slow and even. The pen gate is a single pole, horizontal, dropped into 2 forked uprights. I lift it clear. It weighs almost nothing. Below the pole, the actual opening is sealed with rope, the thick multiple wrap lashing I saw from the hill. I get my knife into the first layer and start working. The rope is dry cured and hard. The knife cuts it, but not cleanly. I have to saw at each fiber, and the fibers are packed in tight. 60 seconds, 70, 80. I'm at 60% through the wrap when the figure inside the pen shifts and rises, and I see the blur of a face turning toward me in the dark. He opens his mouth. My hand is over it before the sound comes out. I feel him tense, every muscle going rigid at once, and I put my mouth close to his ear and whisper in Japanese, "Quiet, I'm from school, we're leaving." A long pause. I can feel his pulse against my palm, very fast. Then, slowly, his shoulders drop. He nods against my hand. I take my hand away. He doesn't make a sound. I go back to the rope, another 30 seconds and the last wrap part. I push the gate section open, just wide enough, and he squeezes through. Up close I can see him clearly enough. Short, slight, school shirt and trousers both filthy, one lens of his glasses cracked across the center. He looks at me with a focused, measuring expression that seems oddly calm given the circumstances. I point at the gap in the palisade. He nods. We're halfway to it when the dog starts barking. It comes from the far side of the compound. A sudden, sharp, escalating sound that cuts straight through the silence. I don't look for the dog. I reach into my shirt pocket and pull out the piece of dried meat I brought specifically for this possibility, and I throw it in the direction of the sound. A firm underarm toss, and I grab the boy's wrist and move. We're through the gap in 6 seconds. Behind us, I hear the barking cut off. The meat, the distraction, buying me exactly the window I need. Then a voice, sharp and alert from somewhere near the gate. Another voice, answering. The sentry, we run. I lead. I know this ground. I know where the exposed root is at the base of the first slope, so I step over it without breaking stride. I know where the soft patch is 20 meters further on, so I steer right. The boy is right behind me. He stumbles once on something I don't catch, and I haul him upright by the wrist without slowing. Behind us, the village is waking. Voices rising, firelight starting to move, torches being lit. We hit the choke point at the narrow passage between the root buttresses. I step over the tripwire cord without thinking. I know exactly where it is. The boy, following my exact footsteps, steps over it too. 40 seconds later, I hear the people coming behind us hit it at a run. The sound of 4 heavy stones dropping onto hard root is genuinely impressive. It's followed by shouting, a crash, more shouting. I don't stop to appreciate it. 4 minutes, maybe 5. That's what it buys us. We use every second. We reach the camp. I push through the liana curtain and the boy followed. I drop the curtain back. We stand in the dark under the overhang, breathing hard, and I listen to the jungle for 3 full minutes. The pursuit sounds fade, then stop. I let my breath out. Ayo makes a short sound from his root. The 2-note, one but quieter, almost conversational. I'm not sure what it means in this context. Maybe nothing. Maybe just checking. The boy sits down heavily on the ground, pulls his knees up, and pushes his cracked glasses up his nose. He looks around the camp. The fire pit, the bamboo containers, the hanging food store, the woven curtained entrance, with the same measuring, cataloging expression he had inside the pen. They kept me 4 days, he says. Low voice, flat. Fed me, not much, but regularly. He pauses. I couldn't figure out why. Maybe they were keeping you for something. Maybe. He considers this. Or they hadn't decided yet. His name is Nobu Shirakawa, 17 years old. In school, he was the top student in mathematics and physics by a significant margin. Physically, small, light, the kind of person who gets picked last for everything. But while he was sitting in that pen for 4 days, he watched. He tells me the guard rotation, which matches my observations exactly, plus 2 details I missed. He tells me the approximate number of hunters, adult men carrying weapons, which he estimates at between 14 and 17, consistent with what I counted. He tells me where the weapons are stored when not in active use, a structure on the north interior wall of the compound, larger than the others, always with at least one person near it. He tells me all of this in a quiet, systematic sequence, like he's reading from notes he made in his head. I listen to the whole thing before I say anything. You were in a cage for 4 days, I say finally, and you spent the time building a database. Nobu looks at me through the cracked lens. What else was I going to do? I think about the 3 days I spent watching from the jungle, moving carefully, logging what I could see. I thought I'd done a thorough job. I got the guard rotation and a rough head count and the location of the pen. Nobu got all of that, plus the weapon storage, the internal social hierarchy as far as he could read it, the rough daily schedule, and the location of the water source inside the compound. He did it from inside a cage in 4 days, with no notes. Nothing, I say. You did exactly the right thing. He nods, already looking around the camp again with that calm, systematic gaze, filing everything away. Outside, the jungle has gone quiet again. The fires in the village, a kilometer north and uphill, are just a faint orange tint at the edge of the sky. They know we're here now. They knew before probably the SOS on the beach, the smoke before I learned to hide it. But now they know we're not just lost survivors stumbling around. Now they know someone came into their compound and took their prisoner back. The dynamic just changed. Ao wakes me before sunrise, not his voice. The belt. 3 nights ago, I found a small fragment of metal in the dirt near the base of the overhang, a curved sliver about the size of my thumbnail, thin enough to vibrate when struck. I bent it into a loose loop with my knife tip and tied it to Ao's left leg with a short piece of palm fiber, loose enough to not cut, tight enough to stay. When he moves fast, it makes a thin, clear chime. He's moving fast now. I'm on my feet before I'm fully awake, knife in hand. Listening, Ao is standing on the highest point of the overhang entrance, perfectly still now. The bell silent again. His head is aimed northeast. The 2-note signal, short, sharp, clipped, comes twice, then stops. people, clothes. I crouch at the entrance and look through the liana curtain without touching it. The jungle is gray and shapeless in the pre-dawn light. I watch for 2 full minutes. Nothing moves, but the birds in the canopy northeast of us have gone quiet in a band that shifts slowly westward. Something pushing through the undergrowth, scattering the birds in sequence. More than one something. I pull back inside and wake Nobu. He's already half awake light sleeper apparently. He sits up, pushes his cracked glasses onto his face, and looks at me without speaking. I hold up 2 fingers and point northeast. He nods once. Scouts, he says very quietly. Not the main group. They'll be tracking, not attacking. Looking for signs. He pauses. They'll find them. I know he's right. I've been careful, walking on stones where I can, breaking no branches, scattering the ash from the fire pit. But careful isn't invisible. There are 2 people living under this overhang, and 2 people leave evidence no matter how careful they are. A footprint here, a disturbed patch of moss there, the faint smell of cooked meat. How long, I ask? They'll report back first. He thinks about it with his eyes slightly unfocused, running through something internal. Then they'll come in force. They move after dark when they're hunting. I watch them 3 times from the pen. They prefer the psychological advantage. He looks at me. We have until tonight. 6 hours, maybe 8. 6 hours. I look around the camp. 5 days of work inside these walls. The bamboo containers, the food store, the fire system, the tools, the spear leaning against the rock. Everything I built from nothing. We could run, I say. Not because I want to, because it needs to be said out loud and evaluated properly. Nobu shakes his head immediately. They know this island. Every trail, every water source, every clearing. Out in the open, we're slower than them. We have no cover, and we're easy to surround. He gestures at the overhang, the liana curtain, the rock walls on 2 sides. Here we know the terrain within 50 meters better than they do. We have a ceiling above us and rock on 2 flanks. They can only approach from 3 directions. He pauses. Running is worse. I think about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then we build, I say. The first hour goes to the signal net. I have maybe 40 meters of usable cordage in total. The liana rope, the palm fiber lengths I've been accumulating, the inner cord from my belt. I use it to string a network of trip lines at ankle height across every approach to the camp except one. The lines are thin and dark and run across the ground at irregular heights, tied between root buttresses and low branches, at points where the natural shadows will hide them even in daylight, let alone at night. To each line I attach a cluster of 3 or 4 dry leaves, stiff ones, the kind that crackle when moved, not a loud sound. But in the dark, when someone is trying to move quietly, a sudden rustle from knee height is enough to cause a half-second freeze. A half-second is enough for me to know where they are. The one approach I leave clean is the northeast path, the direction they came from, the direction any tracker worth his training will identify as the least defended line. I want them to see the other approaches covered and funnel themselves toward the open one. At the end of the open path, we dig the pit. It's hard work. The soil under the overhang is rocky and dry, and the only tools we have are a sharpened stick, my knife handle used as a scraper, and our hands. Nobu digs badly. His hands aren't built for this, and within 15 minutes his palms are raw. He doesn't stop. He keeps scraping and scooping, methodical, not fast. After 40 minutes, we have a pit roughly 80 centimeters deep. Nobu sits back and measures it against his own body. Not enough, he said. He's not complaining, just stating a fact. A grown man with any presence of mind can pull himself out of 80 centimeters. We need at least 120, or we need to make it wider so the fall is harder to arrest. Wider, I say, because the soil below us gets rockier as we go down. How wide? 1.5 meters minimum. Falling into a wide pit in the dark at running speed, you don't instinctively know where the walls are. The disorientation is more important than the depth. We dig wider. Another hour. My shoulders ache in a specific, unpleasant way that I'm getting used to. We hit a large flat rock about 90 centimeters down on the east side and work around it. The finished pit is roughly 90 centimeters deep and 180 wide, almost circular. I cut 20 thin branches from the nearest shrubs and lay them across the opening in a single loose layer, then layer dead leaves on top. Nobu scatters a thin coating of loose dirt over everything. From 2 meters away in daylight, I can see the difference in ground texture if I look carefully. In the dark, moving fast. Following what looks like the only clear path through the camp perimeter, you won't be looking carefully. Good, Nobu says. He looks at it the way he looks at everything. Measuring, logging, filing. Not perfect, but good. The afternoon goes to the torches. I make 4 green branch handles, dry fiber heads, soaked in the last of the rendered animal fat. I place 3 of them at points around the camp perimeter in preset positions, where I can reach them fast and keep one in my hand. By late afternoon, I've also collected a pile of throwing stones, Fist-sized, round enough to carry accurately, rough enough not to slip. I put them in a stack next to where Nobu will be sitting. He looks at the stones. You want me to throw these? Not at anyone, just near them. Impact sound on roots and tree trunks. In the dark, it sounds like more people. He picks one up, tests the weight in his palm. I can do that, I note. They come at what I estimate is 2 in the morning. Ao's bell sounds before I hear anything else. 3 quick chimes as he startles off his perch, then silence as he transfers to the high point of the overhang. I'm already awake. I've been awake for an hour, because there's a specific quality of silence that arrives before something happens, and I've started to recognize it. I tap Nobu's shoulder twice. He's already sitting up. 5 minutes pass. Then the signal net catches something. The dry leaf rustle of the western approach, sharp and sudden. Then the northern one, half a second later. 2 contacts, simultaneously probing the flanks. They're checking the perimeter first, reading it. 40 seconds of silence. Then the northeast path, the clean one, the open one, and this time it's not a probe. I can hear footsteps, the crunch and shift of soil under weight, moving toward us at a steady pace. Multiple footsteps, spaced apart, a loose file. I count. 1, 2, pause, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. I grip the unlit torch and wait. The front of the group hits the pit. The sound is immediate and definitive. A short cut-off cry, the hard thud of impact. Then a second body coming in right behind the first, because the file is too close together to stop in time. 2 voices, sharp and shocked, speaking fast in a language I don't understand. The 3 behind them stop dead. Ao screams, full volume, the alarm call, both notes at once. I step forward and strike the torch head against the coal I've been keeping alive in the pit edge. It catches on the second strike. I step into the northeast path and hold the torch up. The 3 standing men are maybe 8 meters away. Their faces, caught in the sudden flare of torchlight, show exactly what I need them to show. Not anger, not aggression. Surprise! The frozen, recalibrating stillness of people whose plan has just stopped working. Nobu throws the first stone high and wide left, and it crashes into the root system of a tree 3 meters from the leftmost man. The second stone goes right low, hits a root and skips into the undergrowth with a sound like something moving fast. The third stone goes straight up and comes down on the overhang lip, and the rattle of it echoes off the rock like something I can't quite identify. The 3 men look left, right at the torch, at the dark behind me. They can't tell how many people are back there. They don't stay to find out. The leftmost one says something, a single word, hard and clipped, and all 3 turn and go back into the jungle at a run. I listen to them until the sound fades completely, then stay standing for another 2 minutes to be certain. In the pit, the 2 who fell are climbing out, slowly, unhurt beyond bruised dignity, helping each other. They pull themselves over the edge and disappear into the dark after the others without looking back. I lower the torch. Nobu is already crouching over the signal net on the western side, checking which line was tripped. Here, he says, and here. He shows me the disturbed leaves. 2 more were on the flanks. They read the whole perimeter before they committed to the center path. I know. Next time, Nobu says, and his voice is completely level, not frightened, just factual. They'll come with more people. They know the pit is there now. They know we have fire and noise. They'll adjust. He stands up, brushes dirt off his knees, and looks at me through the cracked lens. We need more people, he says. I'm already thinking the same thing. Yeah, I say. We do. The morning after the attack, I take inventory. Food, 4 days of dried meat left. Maybe 5 if we stretch it. 2 people now, not 1. Which means the timeline has compressed by half. Water, stable. The bamboo pipe from the stream is still running. Tools, 2 knives, the spear, the bow drill, a bone needle I haven't finished yet. 40-odd meters of cordage in various qualities. Torches, 3 remaining after last night. The boar has been circling this camp since my first night on the island. Every morning I find fresh prints. It drinks at the stream, somewhere north of where I collect water. It weighs approximately 60 kilograms based on the depth of its tracks in soft ground. And it's a young male. The hoof pattern is narrow, the stride length moderate. Not the massive territory holder I was initially afraid of. Still dangerous. Still 60 kilograms of muscle that would rather run you down than avoid you. Also 60 kilograms of meat, fat, bone, and hide that would extend our food supply from 5 days to 3 weeks. I'm going to find it, I tell Nobu. He looks up from the signal net he's been repairing. And then what? And then I'm going to kill it. He considers this for a moment. How? I'll figure that out when I find it. This is in retrospect not a good plan. I find the boar at the waterhole 40 minutes later. It's standing at the stream bank about 120 meters north of my usual collection point, in a wide, shallow section where the water spreads over flat stones. Young male as I estimated. The hide is dark and bristled, the snout working constantly, reading the air. The tusks are small, maybe 8 centimeters, but angled correctly to do serious damage if they connect with anything soft. I'm downwind, which is the one thing I did correctly. I circle wide and come up from the south, keeping trees between us, closing to about 20 meters before I stop. The boar is still drinking, head down, completely unaware. 20 meters, that's close enough. Bear has thrown spears farther than that at stationary targets. I raise the spear, sight along the shaft, and throw. The boar moves, not in response to the throw, it's just shifting its weight, lifting its head, some animal instinct that has nothing to do with me. The movement is maybe 15 centimeters. But 15 centimeters at 20 meters is the difference between center mass and open air. And the spear hits open air, skips off the stream bank, and clatters into the rocks on the far side with a sound like a small explosion. The boar doesn't run, it turns. I have approximately 2 seconds to understand that I have made a significant error in judgment before the boar charges. 60 kilograms at full acceleration covers 20 meters faster than I can describe it. I turn and run for the nearest tree, which is a large rooted hardwood about 12 meters away, and I make it with maybe 2 strides to spare. I go up the trunk using the root buttresses as steps, pulling myself onto the lowest branch, 4 meters off the ground, and look down. The boar stands at the base of the tree, it's breathing hard, head up, small eyes locating me with an expression that communicates an entirely reasonable sense of grievance. It makes a short guttural sound and circles the trunk once, twice, then it stands still and waits. 15 minutes, I know because I count. The boar stands at the base of my tree for 15 minutes before it loses interest, sniffs the air once more, and trots back toward the waterhole. I climb down and retrieve the spear, which has a new crack in the shaft where it hit the rocks. I walk back to camp holding it and thinking about what just happened, the gap between knowing something and being able to do it. I've already mapped this gap for fire making, for snake handling, for navigating in jungle. Here it is again. I've been throwing imaginary spears at imaginary boars for years. Every throw landed. Every boar died. This boar moved 15 centimeters, and I missed by 2 meters and spent 15 minutes in a tree. It moved. I tell Nobu when I get back. He nods, unsurprised. Animals move. I need a different approach. Yes, he says you do. He sets down the net and picks up a stick. Tell me everything about how the boar uses the waterhole. Time of day. Approach direction, how long it stays, whether it checks the area before it drinks. I tell him. He draws in the dirt while I talk, not a picture, a diagram. The stream bank, the flat stones, the tree lines on each side, the boar's approach path from the north. It comes the same route every time, he asks. As far as I can tell, the tracks are layered. Same path, multiple days. Habitual approach, habitual destination. He taps the diagram. Then you don't need to throw anything at it. You need to put a hole in the ground 2 meters from the water's edge on the approach path before it arrives. We spend the afternoon digging at the waterhole. Nobu's calculations. A 60-kilogram boar running at roughly 15 kilometers per hour needs approximately 2 meters of clear ground to break to a stop after it perceives an obstacle. If the pit begins at 2 meters from the water's edge, the boar is already at near full approach speed when the ground disappears. Ideally, there's a margin of error that neither of us can fully account for, so we place the pit at 1.8 meters, which is a compromise between the theory and the practical constraint that the stream bank on the near side is rocky and limits where we can dig. Depth, 70 centimeters. Not enough to hold an adult human, but a boar is lower to the ground and doesn't have hands to arrest a fall. The walls are steep and smooth. I compact them with the flat of my knife and with water from the stream, letting the mud dry hard in the afternoon sun. The cover is the critical part. I cut 30 thin branches, each about 40 centimeters, and lay them across the opening in a tight lattice. Over the lattice goes a layer of the same moss and leaf litter that covers the surrounding ground. Not all of it, just enough to break the visual outline. Nobu and I both rub our hands on the raw earth and press them onto the branches to transfer ground scent over the smell of cut wood. We approach and leave the site by different routes each time, stepping on stones, not leaving a visible trail. Then we go back to camp and wait. The first evening, nothing. The boar doesn't come, or comes from a different direction, or detects something wrong. I go at dawn and check the trap. Undisturbed. Cover still intact. The second evening, just before dark, Ao's bell sounds from outside the camp. Not the alarm signal, just one note, like he shifted suddenly. I go to the entrance and look out. Somewhere north of us, in the direction of the waterhole, there's a sound. A crash, then a sustained high shriek that cuts through the jungle and bounces off the overhang wall and raises every hair on my arm simultaneously. The boar is in the pit. It's still fighting when we get there. The cover has collapsed completely inward, and the boar is in the bottom of the pit, all 4 legs working, trying to find purchase on the smooth, compacted walls. It's strong. I can see marks where the hooves have gouged the clay, but the walls are steep enough and the pit wide enough that every time it gets half purchase on one side, its hindquarters slide on the other. The shrieking has dropped to a continuous lower sound, more exhaustion than panic. I stand at the edge with the spear. This is not like throwing at a moving target from 20 meters. The boar is below me, constrained, and I know exactly where the vulnerable point is, base of the skull, where the spine meets the head. I've read this. I've thought about this. Even so, it takes me a moment to do it. I do it. The sound stops. The pit goes still. I sit down on the bank next to Nobu and look at the pit for a while. You set the trap, Nobu says. You didn't chase it, you thought like it. That's what Bear always said. I say, don't pursue the animal, think ahead of it. Bear Grylls, the TV show, survival program. Nobu is quiet for a moment, and this is what you learn from a television program. And books, and about 300 hours of very specific note-taking. Another pause. That's strange, Nobu says, in exactly the same tone he uses to announce that a pit needs to be wider. Not a judgment, just a classification. Yeah, I say, everyone said so. We work for 2 hours. Nobu keeps count while I work, because that's what Nobu does. Approximately 15 kilograms of usable meat. I separate it roughly more by feel than precision and lay it out on flat stones. 3 kilograms of fat, maybe slightly more from the thick subcutaneous layer along the back and belly. I render it slowly over the fire in the bamboo section, skimming off the impurities until what remains is clear and clean. This goes into a sealed bamboo container. Fuel for torches, insect repellent, leather treatment. The bones come next. Most of them go into the fire for marrow. I've been protein depleted for 6 days, and my body makes its opinion on this very clear when I drink the first bamboo cup of broth. 2 of the longer bones I split lengthwise and sharpen against the flat stone I use for a whetstone. The resulting points are not as strong as flint, but they're narrower, which means they'll penetrate further on a light frame. Good for arrow tips, eventually. 1 thin rib bone I work for an hour with my knife tip until it has an eye and a usable point. I thread it with a thin strip of palm fiber and push it through 2 layers of the boar hide. It goes through. Does that work? Nobu asks, watching apparently. I push it through again. The fiber pulls clean. I hand the needle to Nobu. He looks at it for a moment, turns it over. Then, without saying anything, he pulls his shirt off. One arm, locates the largest tear in the sleeve. A 10-centimeter rip along the seam, threads the needle carefully, and begins to sew. Small, even stitches, slightly too tight on the first pass, then adjusted. He works for about 5 minutes and hands the shirt back to me. The seam is closed, not beautifully, but solidly. He takes the needle back, puts it in his own pocket, and doesn't say anything. Neither do I. The hide I cut into strips with the knife. Long, even pieces about 3 centimeters wide. Both of us have been walking barefoot or in disintegrating shoes since the ship went down, and the soles of my feet are in a state that I've been ignoring because there's always something more urgent. I fold 2 of the strips into rough sandal shapes, punch holes with the knife tip, and lace them with thinner strips cut from the same hide. They're ugly. They're stiff. They're the best things I've worn on my feet in 6 days. The next morning, Ao disappears. Not unusual. The splint came off 4 days ago, and the wing is mostly healed, and Ao has taken to making short, independent flights around the camp perimeter, sometimes for an hour or more. I don't track him anymore. He always comes back. This time he's gone for longer. I start to notice the absence around mid-morning. Nobu notices me noticing. We don't discuss it. At almost exactly 2 hours, Ao comes back. He lands on the overhang lip and immediately launches again, a short, agitated flight to the east. Back to the lip, east again. He does this 4 times, each time landing in exactly the same spot, and looking at me with an expression that communicates, as clearly as anything I've seen from an animal, that I'm being extremely slow. He found something, Nobu says, or someone. We follow. Ao leads east toward the rocky section of the island where the terrain breaks up into a series of low cliff faces and narrow gullies. I've scouted this area briefly. It's harder going than the jungle. Lots of exposed limestone, unstable in places. Not somewhere you'd choose to set up camp, but somewhere you might end up if you were disoriented and looking for shelter. We find him in a crack between 2 large boulders. A natural recess about 2 meters deep, wide enough to sit in, partially sheltered from above. He's sitting with his back against the inner wall, knees pulled up, a length of wood about 1 meter long across his lap, both eyes on us from the moment we come into the gully, tracking us. Not panicked, but measuring. The cut on his forehead has scabbed over, but not cleanly. 2 of the fingers on his left hand are strapped together with a strip of torn cloth. Improvised splint, the same instinct I used on Ao. He's bigger than most of our classmates. broad shoulders, the kind of physical build that takes up space naturally. I recognize the face before I fully recognize the name. Rei Saito, 17, sports captain, spring tournament, 3 years running. He looks at me for a moment, then at the spear in my hand, at Ao on my shoulder, at Nobu standing half a step behind me. Harada, he says. His voice is flat, controlled, the way voices get when they've been alone long enough that speaking out loud feels like a technical exercise. You're alive. You too, I say. Come on. He stands, picks up the wooden club, and follows us back without asking where we're going. At camp, the first thing he does is eat. I give him dried meat and a full bamboo section of water, and he finishes both without speaking. Then he looks around at the overhang, the curtained entrance, the fire pit, the signal net, the drying rack with the last of the boar hides stretched across it. He takes it all in slowly, the way someone inventories a room. You made all of this, he says. Not a question exactly. Something between surprise and a statement of fact. Nobu, help. Rei looks at Nobu. Nobu is sitting cross-legged on the far side of the fire pit, restringing a section of the signal net with fresh palm fiber. He doesn't look up. Nobu Shirakawa, Rei says. You were always last in PE. Nobu pulls a knot tight. I calculated the pit dimensions correctly, he says, still not looking up. We caught a 60-kilogram boar. The PE record seems less relevant now. Rei looks at the boar hide on the drying rack for a long moment. Then he sits down, leans his club against the rock wall, and doesn't say anything else, which, coming from Rei Saito, is the loudest kind of agreement. Rei wakes up before I do. I find this out when I open my eyes and he's already outside, holding one of the upright poles of the windbreak and prodding it with his thumb. The expression on his face the same one he makes during practice drills when something isn't up to standard. This will fall in rain, he says, without turning around. The angle's wrong, and the cross support is too light. It's held for 5 nights. Hasn't rained hard yet. He presses the pole sideways and it flexes more than it should. Today we fix it. 3 of us now, and 3 changes everything. For 5 days I've been operating at maximum solo capacity, meaning I can either build or hunt or scout. Pick one and everything else waits. Nobu added calculation and observation, which doubled the quality of decisions but didn't change the physical output. Rei adds output, pure, efficient, apparently tireless physical output. The new shelter frame takes 6 hours. Not 6 hours of struggling the way my first hour of bow drill felt. 6 hours of Rei working steadily through a task list, while Nobu and I supply materials and decisions. The uprights are heavier poles than anything I managed to cut and carry alone, each one straight enough to stay vertical without being braced, driven into the ground deep enough that Rei's weight on them doesn't shift the base. He reads the overhang geometry and adjusts the frame pitch without being asked, because he spent 3 years building and rebuilding athletic structures, and his eye for load-bearing angles is automatic. The roof goes on in 3 layers. First, the heaviest palm fronds, the ones with the thickest midrib, laid with the stems toward the ridge, overlapping like scales on a fish. Second layer, turned 90 degrees, finer fronds filling the gaps. Third layer, the broadest leaves I can find, pinned down with a lattice of light branches to stop wind from lifting them. I pour water on it from the bamboo container, while Rei watches from inside. The water sheets off and hits the ground 2 feet from the entrance. Nothing comes through. Good, Rei says. The floor comes up next. We cut enough light branches to lay a platform 20 centimeters off the ground across the entire sleeping area, lashed into a rough grid with palm fiber. Not comfortable. The gaps between branches will leave marks on anyone who sleeps on them, but it means no ground contact, which means no insects crawling up from the soil at night, no moisture wicking through from the earth, no small things with too many legs investigating the warm shapes lying on the ground. I know from several sources that ground contact is one of the primary vectors for tropical parasite exposure. I've been sleeping directly on the earth for 5 nights. I don't think about this too carefully. The storage pit takes RIA 90 minutes alone. 80 by 80 centimeters, 60 deep walls, compacted smooth. At the depth, the soil is noticeably cooler. I put my hand against the wall and feel the difference clearly. 5 or 6 degrees at least. Everything perishable goes in. The dried meat, the remaining fat container. 3 coconuts, a flat stone across the top, heavy enough that small animals won't shift it. The signal net expansion takes the rest of the afternoon. Rei and I walked the full perimeter at 50 meters, farther than I'd ever scouted systematically. While Nobu stays at camp and keeps track on a diagram he's scratching into the flat stone near the fire pit. The same stone he's been using to work out structural calculations. He shouts questions occasionally. How wide is the gap between the 2 root buttresses on the northwest side? What's the ground like on the eastern approach where the stone outcrop starts? When we come back, he points to 2 places on the diagram. Northeast gap, he says. And here, east of the stream crossing, Both of those can be approached across stone without touching any of your triplins. Anyone who scouted this camp in daylight would find those routes. I look at the diagram. He's right on both counts. Neither of them occurred to me. We run lines across both approaches, lower tension than the others, set at a slightly different height. So even if someone who knows the system is watching for standard triplin height, these will catch them at a different point in their stride. By sunset, the camp looks different. Not dramatically different. The overhang in the liana curtain and the fire pit in its stone-lined hole are all the same, but it feels structurally sound in a way it didn't before. The way a thing feels when it's been built properly, rather than assembled under pressure. Ray sits down with his back against the overhang wall, looks at the ceiling, and says nothing for a while. Then, in school I thought you were just weird. I'm sharpening one of the bone points against the whetstone and don't look up. I know. The survival show thing, the notebooks, a pause. I thought it was a phase. It wasn't. No. He's quiet for a moment. You're still weird. Another pause. But it's the right kind of weird. I keep sharpening. Nobu from the other side of the fire pit. That's the most he said in one conversation since he arrived. Ray looks at him. Nobu is already looking back down at his diagram. The corner of Nobu's mouth does something that isn't quite a smile. The bow takes 2 days. The first version I built alone before RAI arrived was functional but weak. The draw weight was limited by what my hands could hold under tension while I lashed the grip. And the result was something that could put an arrow 30 meters in a general direction, but not reliably in a specific one. It was also strung with palm fiber which stretches. Ray holds the bow while I string it. His grip is simply stronger than mine. He holds the limbs in their bent position without effort, while I work the sinew into place. Which means the finished bow has significantly more stored energy than anything I could build solo. The sinew is from the boar's leg. I dried 2 long strips over the past 2 days, stretching them between stakes until they cured flat and hard, then soaking them briefly in water before stringing to make them supple enough to work with. Once they dry again under tension, they'll set permanently. The result? A bow with a draw weight I estimate at roughly 20 kilograms. Not a hunting bow by any serious standard, but at 25 meters, the arrows land where you aim them, and that's what matters. The arrows I've been making for 3 days in spare moments. The shafts are young bamboo shoots, the straightest I could find dried over the fire to set the straightness and stop them warping. 12 of them, varying slightly in thickness. The points are bone from the boar, roughly triangular, lashed with the thinnest fiber I can produce. The fletching is where AO becomes unexpectedly useful. He's been molting slightly since the wing injury healed. Stress molt, probably. And there are small green and blue feathers on the ground around his usual perch each morning. I collect them. 3 per arrow, spaced evenly, bound with pine resin. Ray tests the bow first. He handles it correctly without being shown. The mechanics of a short bow aren't complicated if you've spent time with any kind of projectile equipment. His first arrow hits a tree 2 meters left of the mark. He adjusts without comment, shoots again, center mass. Range, he says, 25 meters accurate. 35, if you don't care exactly where it hits. He nods. Nobu picks the bow up next. He holds it strangely, elbow slightly raised, grip looser than it should be. He aims at the same tree about 22 meters away and goes still. His lips move slightly. He releases. The arrow hits almost exactly where Ray's second one did. Ray stares at him. How did you do that? Nobu hands the bow back. Draw weight, arrow mass, expected arc, wind from the northwest at roughly 3 kilometers per hour, based on leaf movement in the canopy. It's a calculation. He pauses. The difficult part was accounting for my grip and consistency. I haven't fully solved that yet. Ray looks at the tree, looks at Nobu. You skipped PE for 3 years. I attended the minimum required sessions. Nobu says, I did not skip. There's a difference. Fine. You attended the minimum required sessions, and now you can shoot. I can calculate a shot, Nobu says, with the patient precision of someone who considers the distinction important. That's not quite the same thing. Ask me again after 50 repetitions. Ray opens his mouth and closes it again. Looks at me. I shrug. He's like this about everything. AO disappears again on the morning of day 7. This time I'm not worried. I recognize the pattern now. He'll be gone for an hour, maybe 2, and when he comes back he'll be agitated and directional. I tell Ray and Nobu to keep working on the second bow. Simpler design. Lower draw weight, sized for Nobu's grip, and wait, an hour and 40 minutes. Then the bell sounds outside, and AO comes through the curtain with the particular energy he had when he found Ray, landing, relaunching, landing again, each time facing the same direction, north-northeast this time, the rocky section of coastline, where the island curves toward its northern point and the terrain gets broken and strange. All 4 of us go. The northern point is harder going than the eastern jungle. The limestone breaks up into sections. some of it unstable, and there are gaps between boulders wide enough to twist an ankle in if you're moving without attention. Ao navigates it effortlessly, landing on high points and watching us scramble up to him. Rei moves well through it. Nobu moves carefully. I stay in the middle and watch both of them. We find her in a crack in the cliff face, 2 meters deep and wide enough to sit in, sheltered by an overhang that must have kept most of the rain off. She's sitting with her knees up and her back against the stone, and she's awake. She tracks us from the moment we come around the boulder, watching us approach with dark, still eyes. She's thinner than she was on the ship. Her hair is loose and tangled with leaf matter. Her school jacket is gone, and the shirt underneath is torn at one shoulder. Her hands folded in her lap are scratched from the limestone. On the flat section of stone beside her, scratched in with what looks like a sharp fragment of rock, is a diagram. Aki Fujimori. I've known her name for 3 years. I've spent roughly that same amount of time finding reasons to be near her without actually talking to her. The last time I saw her, she was standing at the railing of the ship, looking at stars, and I couldn't make my feet walk across the deck. She looks at me, then at Ao on my shoulder. The parrot found me, she says. He finds everyone. I say. My voice comes out normally. I'm slightly surprised. She looks at Ao for a moment. Ao makes a short one-note sound. Not a signal, just acknowledgement. She extends one finger slowly, and he steps onto it for exactly 3 seconds before stepping back to my shoulder. She watches him do it. Okay, she says, and stands up. I look at the diagram on the stone while she steadies herself. It covers most of the flat surface. A rough aerial sketch of the island's coastline, with interior features marked by hatching and symbols. The scale is consistent across the whole thing. The northern point where we are now is accurate. The eastern beach, the stream, the central ridge all place correctly relative to each other. In the southwest, there's a concave section of coastline marked with a rough symbol I don't immediately recognize. How long did this take, I ask. 3 days, she says. I had time. She pauses. I climb to the ridge on the second day to check the western side. There's a sheltered bay over there. I marked it. I look at the symbol again. A bay. Nobu crouches beside the stone diagram and traces the coastline with one finger, not touching the surface. His eyes move over it in the systematic way they move over everything. He pulls out his own flat stone, the one he carries for calculations, and holds them side by side. After a moment he says, "This is more accurate than mine." Aki looks at him. I couldn't tell from the ridge whether the western approach was deep enough for a boat. For a boat, Nobu repeats. He looks up at her. If we're building a raft, she says, deep water on the launch side matters. Nobody says anything for a moment. Rei, who has been standing behind all of us with his arms folded, looks at the diagram, then at Aki, then at me. Is everyone from our school like this, he says? Or did I just spend 3 years talking to the wrong people? We carry the stone back to camp. It's heavy, maybe 12 kilograms, and flat enough to be awkward. And Rei and I take turns carrying it, while Aki walks ahead, and Nobu carries the second boat we've been building, but the diagram scratched into its surface is too detailed to copy accurately onto anything else we have, and losing it feels like losing a decision we haven't made yet. Back at camp, Nobu sets it on the ground next to his own calculations, stone, and crouches over both of them for several minutes without speaking. The rest of us eat, drink water, let the adrenaline of the northern point scramble wear off. Eventually Nobu sits back. 4 kilometers long, he says, roughly 2 wide. The central ridge runs northeast to southwest. The village is on the high point, which explains why they have good sight lines in most directions. He traces the line with his finger, not touching the stone. Eastern shore is ours. Western shore is lower, more gradual slope down to the water. He stops at the southwest section. And here the bay. Aki scratched it in with a slightly different pressure than the coastline. The lines are deeper, more deliberate, like she wanted to make sure it didn't get confused with the general shape of the shore. 2 arms of rock curving inward from both sides, leaving a protected pocket of water, maybe 150 meters across. The interior lines suggest a sand bottom, shallow or near the edges. Sheltered water, Nobu says. The eastern beach has consistent wave action. We've both seen it. A raft launched from there in any kind of swell would be fighting the shore break for the first 100 meters. The bay with rock arms on 2 sides will have maybe a quarter of that wave energy inside it. He looks at Kai. If we're building something to launch and then actually sail, that's where we do it. Kai looks at the map, then at the 4 of them. Rei sitting with the new bow across his knees. Aki cross-legged with her arms resting on her knees. Nobu with both calculation stones in front of him. 8 days on this island, food for 2 weeks. The tribe knows exactly where they are, and they are not going to stop coming. We need a raft, Kai says. It's the only way off. Rei looks up from the bow. A raft. Yes, a pause. How big? Nobu is already writing in the dirt. 4 of us average 60 kilograms. Supply weight, dried meat, Water containers, tools, call it 50 kilograms. Total load, 310. Dry bamboo has a buoyancy of roughly 70 to 80 kilograms per meter of length at 10 centimeter diameter. He works through the arithmetic without pausing. Minimum raft dimensions, 4 meters by 2. That requires approximately 50 stems. Ray stares at the calculation in the dirt. 50 stems at 10 centimeter diameter. Yes, we can compensate partially with more stems at smaller diameter, but the lashing requirement increases significantly, and we're already constrained on cordage. How long? At our current working capacity, 5 to 7 days for harvesting and initial construction alone. Drying time for freshly cut bamboo adds 3 to 4 days, unless we can source stems that are already partially dry. He looks up. There's a stand of bamboo on the western side that Kai noted on his first exploration. Older growth, partially shaded. Some of it may be dry enough to use without waiting. Ray is quiet for a moment, and the tribe comes back before that. Almost certainly. Nobu says he doesn't soften it. Then we'd better start today, Ray says and picks up the axe. Kai and Nobu go west. Ray stays at camp, not because Kai asks him to, but because Ray looks at the half-built second bow and the unfinished sections of signal net and makes the calculation himself. Aki stays too, adding detail to the map from memory while the image is still fresh. The western trail branches off the main north-south path about 400 meters from camp, a narrower track that descends gradually toward the lower terrain. Kai has scouted this direction once before but turned back. The bamboo stand he found was promising, but he was alone and carrying tools was a problem. Now he has a second person and 2 knives instead of 1. They follow the track for about 600 meters before the jungle changes. The canopy opens slightly, the understory thins, and the soil gets paler and sandier as the elevation drops toward the western shore. The bamboo stand is right where Kai remembers it, a dense cluster pushing up through the older trees. The lower stems yellow-brown and dry where they've died back naturally. The upper growth still green. Nobu walks through the stand, pressing stems, checking the nodes, making sounds of quiet assessment. The outer ring is mostly dry, he says. The inner growth is still green. We want the outer ring. 30, maybe 35 stems we can use without waiting for cure time. He marks the boundary with a line scratched in the soil. Cut from here outward. Leave the inner growth. In 4 days the outer ring will be replaced, and we can cut again if we need more. They start cutting. The military knife, even in its restored state, is a better tool for this than the pocket knife. The blade is twice as long, and the weight of the handle allows a chopping stroke rather than a sawing one. Kai cuts while Nobu stacks and measures, sorting stems by diameter and straightness, rejecting anything with significant bend or surface damage. They are 2 hours into the work when Nobu stops. There, he says. Kai looks up. Nobu is pointing west-southwest, through the thinning trees toward what Kai initially reads as a shadow change in the undergrowth. Then the shapes resolve concrete, gray, moss-covered, partially swallowed by the roots of a large tree that has grown up through a crack in the floor. A wall, a low rectangular structure, its roof mostly collapsed inward, the remaining walls standing to about chest height. Japanese military construction, the same style as the bunker fragments on the eastern ridge, the same concrete pour pattern, the same angle iron reinforcement showing through where the surface has eroded. They move toward it carefully, the way you approach anything unknown on this island. The building is a single room, maybe 4 meters by 5. The roof collapse has filled the interior with debris, broken concrete, rotted wooden beams, leaf accumulation from years of rain through the open ceiling, but the walls have kept the worst of the weather off the floor area near the base. And some of what's in there has survived better than it should. Nobu steps through the gap where the door used to be, and begins moving debris methodically. Here, he says, after 3 minutes, he lifts a sheet of rusted metal, corrugated iron, about a meter square, heavy with oxidation but structurally intact. Underneath it, 3 more sheets stacked flat, good for shelter reinforcement, or a surface to work on. Kai is working the far corner, pulling back the leaf accumulation. Brown glass, old bottles, the thick-walled kind from decades ago, several of them intact. He holds one up against the gap in the roof, and the light passes through it, slightly distorted by the curve of the glass. Lens better than the plastic bottle. He sets it aside carefully. More debris, rusted metal objects he can't identify. Their original forms lost to corrosion, a length of angle iron, what might have been a wooden box now a flat deposit of dark wood fibers. Knife tip catches on something in the decomposed wood, a resistance that isn't organic. He pulls it out. A knife, long, maybe 25 centimeters of blade, in a leather sheath that has partially survived by being covered. The leather is stiff and cracked and smells of decay, but it holds. The knife inside is locked in the sheath by a decade or more of combined oxidation and compression. He has to work the blade free with his pocket knife tip, and when it finally pulls clear, The metal is almost uniformly red-brown with rust, except for the spine, which is harder steel and has resisted better. He turns it over in his hands. Military issue. The shape is unmistakable, the fuller running along the flat, the slight curve at the tip. An officer's knife. Probably. The edge is gone completely to rust, but the geometry of the bevel is still there under the oxidation. He finds a flat piece of concrete that has shed its surface layer cleanly and starts working the blade against it. Rust comes off in orange-red dust. Under the rust, steel. Not perfect steel, there are shallow pits from the corrosion, but solid, uniformly hard steel that takes a bevel when he works it at the right angle. 3 hours. Nobu works through the rest of the bunker systematically while Kai sharpens. By the time the edge is functional, Nobu has cataloged everything worth taking. 4 metal sheets, 7 intact glass bottles, the angle iron, and in a sealed section of rotted wooden crate, 2 coils of corroded wire that, when untwisted, reveal a copper core that's still conductive and flexible. The last thing Nobu finds, in the deepest intact corner of the bunker, under a section of collapsed roof that has to be moved piece by piece, is a small metal cylinder, cracked down one side. Inside, wrapped in what was once oilcloth and is now a fragile brown membrane, is a compass. Not the compass itself. The housing has split and the compass card is gone, but the needle is still there. A thin magnetized sliver of metal balanced on its pivot. Nobu lifts it out with 2 fingers and hangs it from a thread of palm fiber from the ceiling gap. It swings, settles, points north. Magnetization survives indefinitely if the metal isn't heated, Nobu says, watching the needle. This has been here since the 1940s at earliest. Still works. Kai looks at the needle, then at the military knife in his hand, its new edge gleaming dully in the filtered light. Then back at the needle, 2 knives now, one of them twice the size of what he started with. A compass needle. 4 metal sheets, glass for fire starting that doesn't depend on sunlight angle or cloud cover. Copper wire with a dozen uses he hasn't worked out yet. He thinks about the ship, about going overboard with nothing but a life preserver and a pocket knife, about how the first night he spent 45 minutes making fire and thought he was going to die of thirst before morning. Aki found the island layout, he says. You calculated the raft. I found the knives and the compass. He pauses. Ray will cut the timber. Nobu takes the compass needle off its thread, wraps it carefully in a strip of palm fiber, and puts it in his breast pocket. Everyone has a function, he says. Yes, in school none of this was obvious. Nobu looks at him with the flat, careful expression he uses when he's deciding whether a statement requires a response. In school, he says finally, none of this was necessary. He picks up 2 of the metal sheets. Kai picks up the other 2. They load as much as they can carry between them, leave the rest for a second trip, and start back east through the late afternoon jungle. The food calculation is straightforward and unpleasant. 14 days of meat, 4 people. That's the current state of the stores. The boar, dried and smoked and packed into the storage pit, has given us 14 person days of protein. For 1 person, that's 2 weeks. For 4 people, it's 3.5 days. Nobu ran the numbers this morning without being asked, set the flat calculation stone down in front of the fire pit, and let the arithmetic speak for itself. 3.5 days. The raft takes 5 to 7 days to build, assuming nothing goes wrong, assuming the tribe doesn't interrupt the work, assuming the bamboo cures fast enough to be seaworthy. During those 5 to 7 days, 4 people need to eat, not enough to be comfortable enough to keep working. The minimum metabolic requirement for sustained physical labor is roughly 1,500 calories per day. We are not hitting that number with what's in the storage pit. We need more protein, Kai says. Nobu nods. Ray looks at the storage pit. Aki looks at the map. The stream has fish, Ray says. We've been catching them. Not enough volume, Nobu says. The individual fish are small and the trap yield is inconsistent. We need a large kill. Everyone looks at Kai. I know where there's another snake, he says. He goes alone, not because the others couldn't help, but because the approach to the root system where he first found the Habu requires silence and patience. And right now, Ray's idea of quiet is still louder than anything the situation can afford. Kai takes the military knife. The longer blade gives more reach. And a straight branch he spent 20 minutes selecting and trimming, 2 meters long, as thick as 2 fingers, completely straight, and with no projections that could catch on anything. The fallen tree is where he left it. The root system is the same dark tangle of earth and exposed wood, the same low cave of shadow underneath. He circles it once from a distance of 5 meters, moving slowly, reading the ground. The approach path is the same compacted leaf litter, same slight depression where the root mass has drained rainwater into a small hollow. He crouches at 3 meters and watches the hollow for 2 minutes move, a slow, almost imperceptible shift in the shadow. The pattern of it changing the way a pattern changes when something that was still starts to breathe differently. The snake is there, same spot, or close enough to it that the distinction doesn't matter. He cuts the branch from his kit and holds it at the far end, extending his arm fully, 2 meters of wood between his hand and whatever happens at the tip. He lowers the tip into the shadow near the hollow and moves it slowly, irregularly. Not a direct prod, just a presence that breaks the stillness. The snake hits the branch so fast he doesn't see it move. One moment the tip of the branch is in the shadow. The next moment there's a strike, a sharp thump transmitted up the wood, and then the snake is in full extension across the root, its body out of the hollow entirely for the first time. It's bigger than he estimated from the first encounter, 1.5 meters, maybe slightly longer, thick through the mid-body, the green-yellow scales exactly as he remembered them. It draws back for a second strike. He steps forward and brings the branch down across the body, just behind the head, pressing hard into the root surface with his full body weight behind the grip. The snake thrashes, the tail end lashing in wide arcs, the body twisting against the wood, but the head is pinned. He gets the knife in his right hand, gets the angle right, and does what needs to be done. The thrashing stops. He sits back from the root and puts the knife down and stays completely still for 3 minutes. His hands are shaking, not a little, the same full hand shaking as the first time, as the second time when the strike caught his sleeve, as every time this has happened. It does not matter how many times he has run through the mechanics in his head, how many times he has visualized the step forward, and the press of the branch, and the clean, controlled finish. The moment the snake moves, the adrenaline arrives, and the adrenaline does not care about preparation. He looks at his hands until they stop. Second time, he says to no one. The jungle does not respond. Knew the species, knew the method. Practiced it 100 times in my head. He picks up the knife. Hands shake every single time. There's no version of this where they don't shake. The snake is 1.3 kilograms. He's learned to estimate mass by feel now. The dead weight of the animal across his hands tells him more than visual estimation. He breaks it down at the stream with the military knife, which makes the work faster and cleaner than the pocket knife ever did. 1.3 kilograms of meat. The flesh is pale, dense, fine-grained. It will smoke well. Bear was right about the taste. He almost leaves the head section at the stream. Then he stops and looks at it for a moment. The venom glands sit just behind the jaw hinge on both sides, slightly swollen, yellowish through the thin membrane. He's never extracted them before, but the anatomy is clear enough that he worked out the approach from descriptions a long time ago. Careful incision along the jawline, blunt separation of the gland from the surrounding tissue, no puncture of the gland surface. He takes 10 minutes on it. Both glands come out intact, each the size of a large grape. He wraps them carefully in a doubled layer of large leaf, ties the package with palm fiber, and carries them back to camp separately from the meat. Nobu looks at the leaf package when Kai sets it on the flat stone. What is that? Venom glands, Habu. A pause. Why? Arrow tips, Kai says. A small amount of hemotoxic venom on a point changes what that arrow does when it hits. He opens the leaf carefully and lets Nobu look without touching. The question is how to apply it without cross-contaminating everything we handle and without wasting it. Nobu studies the glands for a moment. Volume estimate? Enough for 3 or 4 tips if we're careful. Maybe 5 if we apply it thinly. Storage, sealed bamboo container. It degrades over time once the gland is open. The enzymes start breaking down. Maybe 4 days before it's significantly less potent. We apply it to finished arrows and use them quickly or not at all. Nobu nods slowly. So we choose 4 arrows, apply the venom just before we expect to need them, and treat those as last resort tools only. That's the plan. That's a reasonable plan, Nobu says. He looks at the glands once more, then at the wrapped meat. You also brought back 1.3 kilograms of protein, approximately. That extends our supply by 2 days at current consumption. He picks up his calculation stone and adds a line. Better. Aki has been at the second bow for most of the morning. Kai built it 3 days ago. Lighter draw weight than Ray's bow. Shorter limbs, sized for a smaller frame and weaker draw hand. He demonstrated the grip and release once, showed her the anchor point, and left her to it. She's been shooting at a strip of boar hide hung from a branch at 15 meters, and the ground around the hanging target is a forensic record of her progress. Arrows in the dirt to the left, the right, short, occasionally so far wide they've disappeared into the undergrowth entirely. Kai counts without making it obvious. 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 consecutive misses across 3 sessions. Not all terrible misses, the last few have been landing within a meter of the target, but none of them hits the hide. 21. The arrow hits the lower right corner of the hide, a glancing strike that spins it on its cord. Not center mass, but contact. Aki lowers the bow, looks at the hide, doesn't say anything for a moment, then again, Ree's sitting against the overhang wall, fletching new arrows, and he watches this over the top of his work. He says nothing while it's happening, and nothing immediately after. After the 20-second arrow, which hits the hide cleanly center, a solid thump that stops the target dead, he sets down his fletching and says, "You're stubborn." Aki knocks the 23rd arrow. 3 days alone in a crack in a cliff, she says. She draws, settles, and releases. The arrow hits 2 centimeters from the last one. Stubborn is what's left. She reaches for the 24th. Ray watches her for a moment, then picks up his fletching again. The camp is quiet except for the sound of arrows and the distant steady drip of water through the bamboo pipe. Kai looks at the 4 of them. Nobu updating calculations. Ray fletching. Aki shooting. Ao watching from the overhang lip and runs the inventory in his head. Food. Extended by 2 days. Better. Weapons. 2 functional bows, 1 becoming accurate, 1 already there. 31 arrows standard. 4 prepared for venom application. 2 knives, 1 significantly larger than when they started. Defense, signal net, pit, tripwire system. All of it known to the tribe now. All of it needing replacement and variation. Raft, not started. 5 to 7 days of work, waiting. The tribe not heard from in 3 days. Which means nothing because Nobu said it, and Nobu was right. Silence is preparation, not retreat. 3.5 days of food has become 5.5. Still not enough. The raft needs to start tomorrow. Tomorrow we cut bamboo, Kai says. Nobody argues. They spend the morning cutting bamboo, in the afternoon building a falling log trap. The trap is Kai's design, assembled from what they have. A section of hardwood trunk, roughly 2 meters long and heavy enough that Ray needs both hands and a grunt of effort to lift one end. They suspended horizontally between 2 trees at shoulder height, using a release mechanism. A tension cord running to a stake driven into the ground, routed through a notch in one of the suspension trees so that when the cord is hit at shin level, the stake pulls, the cord releases, and 60 kilograms of hardwood drops across the narrow passage between the 2 trees. Testing it takes 3 attempts to get the cord tension right. Too tight and it releases at the wrong angle, dropping the log short of the passage. Too loose and the release point is too far from the path to catch anyone in stride. They find the correct tension on the 3rd try, reset it carefully, and camouflage the trigger cord under a layer of loose leaf litter. Then Nobu sits down on the far side of the fire pit and says, "I've been thinking about the SOS." Kai is replacing the damaged section of the signal net and doesn't look up. "What about it? We made it on day 1. For rescuers' aircraft ships, they approach from the sea and the air." He pauses. The tribe doesn't approach from the sea, but they walk that beach. Every day, probably. It's their island. They would have seen it within the first 48 hours. Kai sets down the cordage. "That's why they found us on day 3. Nobu continues in the same flat, factual voice he uses for all calculations. "Not because we were careless with smoke or noise, because we announced ourselves on their beach on day 1. The silence that follows is the kind that happens when something that should have been obvious resolves into focus too late to do anything about it." Kai thinks about the first morning, the coconut, the bottle, the relief of having a plan. The first thing he did after establishing that he was alive, he laid out the SOS before he had fire, before he had water, before he knew anything about what was on this island. "I built a signal for aircraft," he says, "and handed our location to the tribe." "You didn't know about the tribe," Nobu says. "No, but I didn't check for anything before I acted. I assumed the threat was only from the sea." He looks at the net in his hands. "First decision I made on this island, designed to save my life, immediately made it more dangerous." Nobu nods once. Not agreement exactly, just acknowledgement that the analysis is complete. "Removing it now is pointless," he adds. "They've known where we are for 9 days. What matters is what we do about the next 3. They work through the afternoon on the trap network. The falling log is set on the northeast approach, the same cleaned path that funneled the first probe group toward the pit. The pit is still functional, but now known to the tribe. They will either avoid it or approach it carefully, which means it serves more as a channel now than a catch." Kai uses this. He narrows the viable path around the pit by adding dense thorn branch obstacles on both sides, leaving a single clean route that bypasses the pit to the west, directly into the falling log's drop zone. The signal net gets a 3rd layer. The existing lines are at ankle height and mid-shin height. Kai adds a 3rd set at knee height with heavier stones tied at intervals, not for tripping, but for noise. Anyone who knows the lower lines and steps carefully over them will hit the knee line, and the stones will rattle. Nobu designs a 2nd pit smaller than the first, 40 centimeters wide, 60 deep, placed in the middle of the western approach where the tree roots force any foot traffic into a narrow corridor, too small to fall into properly, but deep enough to catch an ankle and stop a running person cold. It takes 4 hours of combined work to build all of it. By the end, Kai's hands are raw from digging, and his shoulders have developed a specific ache he's learned to recognize as structural rather than critical. He eats, drinks, and lies down while there's still light. Nobu is the last one awake, sitting by the banked fire checking calculations on his stone. Ao wakes them at approximately 2 in the morning. 3 chimes from the bell, rapid, close together, then silence, then 3 more, then continuous agitated movement that makes the bell ring without pattern. Kai is upright before the 3rd sequence ends, hand on the military knife. Everyone is in position within 90 seconds. This is faster than the first attack. They've rehearsed the positions during the day, not formally, just walking through them once, noting sightlines and angles. Rei takes the northwest where the falling log is set, with the spear. Nobu holds the east with the torch unlit in his hand. Aki takes the south with her bow. 3 arrows knocked and ready on the ground beside her. Kai takes the center with the long bow and watches the northeast path. He counts. The signal net catches first. The western approach. The rattling of the knee-height stones. A pause. Then movement continuing. Someone who either didn't feel the line or felt it and kept going anyway. Then the northeast. Multiple contacts. The ankle lines, the mid-shin lines in sequence like something large and deliberate pushing through the system. He counts silhouettes against the moonlit sky above the canopy. 12, twice the number that came before. The first 3 from the northeast reach the pit zone. He watches them slow. They know the pit is there, or they're moving with enough caution to treat the whole approach as trapped. 2 of them go left, 1 goes right, all of them stepping carefully, testing the ground before each foot placement. The left 2 find the channeled path around the pit. Walk it. Step directly into the falling log's trigger zone. The cord releases. The log drops. The sound is enormous in the night silence. The crack of the release mechanism. The heavy hump of 60 kilograms of hardwood across the path. And the sharp, involuntary cry of someone caught underneath it. Not underneath. The log lands across the path and the person on the wrong side of it goes down hard against it. Stopped cold. 1 down. The second person, 1 step behind, collides with the first, and they both go into the earth. The 3rd scout, who went right around the pit, freezes at the sound. Then the 7 remaining people hit the perimeter simultaneously from 3 directions, and everything happens at once. Rei meets the northwest group at the log. He doesn't use the spear point. He uses the shaft, swinging it 2-handed like a staff. The way Kai has watched him adapt his natural athletic instincts to whatever tool is in his hand, the first person through gets the shaft across the midsection at waist height, a solid horizontal strike that stops forward momentum and puts them off balance. The second takes a glancing hit to the shoulder. Rei is loud. He shouts something wordless when he swings, full voice. And in the confined darkness between the trees, it amplifies into something much larger than one person. Kai shoots from the center, not at anyone directly. He shoots into the spaces around the silhouettes, into the roots and tree trunks beside them, close enough to be felt as air displacement, close enough that the sound of the impact tells anyone nearby that something just passed within arm's reach. 2 arrows, 2 solid impacts into wood, both in the right place, both doing exactly what they need to do, creating uncertainty. In the dark, uncertainty is the most powerful weapon available. Nobu lights the torch, and Aki from the south position does something none of them planned. She picks up the 3 additional torches she had prepared, unlit, head soaked in fat, and lights all 3 off Nobu's flame in rapid sequence. Then, in 3 separate throwing motions, she puts them into the dark on the left, the right, and straight ahead. All 3 land in different places at different distances, and all 3 stay burning where they fall. Sudden points of light in completely different directions. The effect is immediate. The 7 people who have breached the perimeter stop, not because the torches are dangerous. They're on the ground. They'll burn for 30 seconds, but because they were moving through darkness. And now there are lights in 3 directions they didn't come from. And the thing that darkness offers an attacker is the certainty that they know where things are. 3 simultaneous, unexpected light sources remove that certainty completely. For 4 or 5 seconds, every person in that perimeter is recalculating. Rei shouts again. Kai looses a 3rd arrow into a root cluster to the north. The loudest impact yet. The nearest silhouettes back up, then the ones behind them. The retreat happens fast, not panic. Something more controlled than panic. More like a collective decision that the calculation has changed and this ground is not worth the cost tonight. They're gone in under a minute. Kai holds his position for 5 full minutes, then moves to check Rei, who is standing at the northwest, breathing hard with one hand pressed flat against his left ribs. Hit, Kai says. Shaft of a spear, glanced off. Rei breathes carefully, testing the depth of the pain. Not through. Bruised, maybe cracked. He takes a full breath and winces. Functional, stay still. I'm fine. Stay still for a minute anyway. In the morning, one of the pit traps has a broken cover section. Someone put weight on it wrong, and the frame collapsed inward. The falling log will need to be re-rigged. The signal net on the western approach is partially dismantled, cut in at least 2 places with something sharp. Ree's ribs, when Kai examines them by daylight, are intact, but deeply bruised. Every breath that uses the lower left lung is audible. He'll work slower and with one side limited, which changes the bamboo cutting timeline. Nobu has been sitting at the flat calculation stone since dawn, and when Kai finishes the injury assessment, Nobu speaks without looking up. They weren't trying to kill anyone, he says. Kai waits. The attack was structured, coordinated entry from 3 directions simultaneously, which requires planning and communication beforehand. The group that reached us first stopped when the log fell. They didn't push through. The ones Ray engaged backed off after contact, instead of pressing the advantage. He looks up. They were counting us, mapping positions, testing which of the traps are real and which are fake, identifying where each of us stands and what weapons we're carrying. A reconnaissance in force, Kai says. Effectively, yes. They now know 4 people, 2 bows, 1 spear, fire capabilities, trap network with specific locations, falling log mechanism. He sets the stone down. The next attack will be planned around all of that information. Kai looks at the camp, the trap system that took 2 days to build. Half of it now compromised or known. The raft that hasn't started yet. The food supply that covers 5.5 days. How long until the next attack, he says. Nobu thinks. They need time to plan a new approach. Probably 2 days. 3 at most. He looks at the bamboo stand visible through the tree line to the west. The raft needs 5 days minimum. The numbers sit in the air between them. Then we don't fight and build. Kai says, we build while setting traps that are different enough from everything they've already seen that they can't predict them. And we build faster than we did yesterday. He picks up the military knife. Ray, can you swing an axe with one arm? Ray is sitting with his back against the overhang, already tying off a new spear shaft with his right hand, while his left stays mostly still. He looks up. I can swing it with one arm, he says. It'll just be slower. Slower is fine. Kai says, we start now. The first bamboo run takes 3 hours and comes back with 22 usable stems. Not 50. 22. Because usable means straight, means minimum 10 centimeter diameter, means no significant surface damage or internal cracking from old damage, means dry enough that the walls don't weep moisture when you press a thumbnail into the node. Out of the full stand on the western slope, roughly 40% meets those criteria. And of that 40%, a third is on the interior of the stand, where the growth is still green and wet. Ray lays the 22 stems in a row on the flat ground west of the overhang and looks at them. Then at Kai, then back at the stems. 22, he says. We need 50. Kai says, I know we need 50. Nobu is already crouching over the calculation stone, redrawing the raft diagram he's made 3 times now in slightly different versions as the numbers have changed. Let me adjust the design first, he says, before we commit to a stem cap. He draws for 5 minutes. The rest of them eat and wait. 4 meters by 2 is the minimum safe displacement for our load, he says. Finally, I can't reduce the footprint without compromising buoyancy, but I can change the stem spacing. He points to the diagram. Standard raft construction spaces stems as close together as possible for structural integrity. We're not carrying cargo, we're carrying people and light supplies. If I increase spacing to 20 centimeters between stems rather than contact packing them, I need fewer stems for the same footprint. Trade-off is flex under load and reduced stability in chop. How many stems? Kai says. 42. Possibly 40 at a push. A pause. The structural risk is real. In calm water, it's fine. In any kind of swell, the raft will move more than a contact-packed design. We're launching from a sheltered bay, Aki says. She's been quiet on the far side of the fire pit, working on a second coil of palm fiber cordage, her hands moving without needing her attention. The swell inside the bay will be minimal. Open water after that. That's the risk. Nobu nods. Acceptable trade-off given our constraints. He looks at Ray. 40 stems, not 50. You need 18 more. Ray picks up the axe. The rope problem is worse than the bamboo problem. Kai lays out everything they have on the flat stone, the palm fiber cordage accumulated over 10 days, which totals roughly 15 meters of varying quality. The inner cord from the life preserver ring, which he hasn't touched because he's been preserving the ring as a flotation aid, but which, unraveled, gives them 8 to 10 meters of solid braided nylon, the only synthetic material they have on the island. The remaining sections of belt and shoelace from 4 people, maybe 3 to 4 meters combined. The boar hide strips cut to binding width, 5 meters. The liana lengths in storage, 20 meters but degrading and unreliable. He adds it up, 51 meters total if you count the liana, which you probably shouldn't for anything structural. 31 meters of material you'd actually trust. 80 is the minimum. 50 meters short, he says. Palm fiber, Nobu says immediately. It's the only scalable source. Everything else is fixed quantity. 1 hour of twisting gives 3 meters. We need 50 more. That's 17 hours of handwork. Divided by 4 people, that's 4 hours each. Nobu looks around the group. Starting now, running parallel to the bamboo cutting and the construction, we close the gap in 2 days. Ray from somewhere in the bamboo stand to the west shouts, "I can hear you calculating. Just tell me when you need me to do something other than cut." "Keep cutting," Nobu says at normal volume. A pot. Then the sound of the fire-assisted cutting method resuming, the low crackle of a small flame at a stem base, and then the sharp impact of the axe against weakened fiber. The fire method was Nobu's suggestion, and it's the reason the bamboo work is happening at any reasonable speed. The principle is simple. You char the base of the stem with a concentrated flame held against it for 2 to 3 minutes, which weakens the outer silica layer and the dense fiber immediately beneath it. Then you drive the axe into the charred zone. The blade goes through in 1 or 2 strokes instead of 5 or 6, and the stem falls clean. It's not faster by a dramatic margin, maybe 40% improvement, but 40% matters. When you're working against a clock you can feel in your chest. The method has one side effect. The cutting site smells strongly of burning, and the smoke from the char fires drifts east in the afternoon wind, toward the village. Kai mentions this to Nobu. "I know," Nobu says. "We have 2 days before the next attack probably. The smoke will confirm our general location, but not our position precisely. The whole western slope smells of it now. I think the information we give them is worth the time we save. You think the calculation is uncertain, but we need the bamboo more than we need the concealment at this point." Kai watches the thin thread of smoke rising from the bamboo stand. "Okay, the mast is the hardest single piece of construction. Not because the concept is complex, it's a straight vertical pole, held in position by 3 attachment points on the raft frame. But a mast that fails at sea is a loss of propulsion in the middle of 600 kilometers of open Pacific, and a mast that shifts in its mount puts asymmetric stress on the whole raft frame in a way that could compromise structural integrity at the worst possible moment." Kai spends a full afternoon on the mount design. The mast itself is the straightest stem in the entire harvest, 3.5 meters, 8 centimeter diameter, with no visible deviation across its length. He tests straightness by rolling it on the flat stone. A perfectly straight cylinder rolls without wobble. This one wobbles slightly at the upper third. He shaves the high side with a military knife until the roll is clean. The mount is a cradle cut into the second crossbeam from the front of the raft, reinforced by 2 bracket pieces lashed on either side. 3 separate lashing points, each using the best cordage available. The nylon from the life preserver, not palm fiber. The nylon will not stretch wet, will not rot, will not abrade through under tension the way plant fiber eventually will. He uses it here, and only here, because it's irreplaceable, and this joint is the one that cannot fail. He tests the mount by setting the mast in it and pushing hard from every angle. It moves less than a centimeter in any direction. "That's solid," Ray says, watching from the bamboo stack. "It needs to stay solid in open water with a sail up." Kai says, "That's a different test. It'll hold," Ray says, not based on engineering analysis. Based on watching Kai work for the last 2 hours, which Ray apparently considers sufficient evidence, the sail takes the rest of the day and the first part of the next morning. 4 shirts sewn together would give a sail of roughly 1.5 meters by 1 meter. Not large, but in a consistent wind, and the Pacific trades are consistent, it's enough to move a 40-kilogram raft at 3 to 4 kilometers per hour, which is 8 to 10 days to the nearest shipping lane. 8 to 10 days is a long time, but it's not impossible. Kai lays the 4 shirts flat on the ground and assesses them. His own has a long tear down the left side from the night of the rescue operation. Ree's is intact but filthy. Nobu's is the cleanest but the smallest. Aki's has one sleeve torn away completely. He sews them together with the bone needle and palm fiber thread, overlapping the edges by 3 centimeters, running a double stitch along every seam. The work is slow, and his hands are not made for fine needlework, and the seams are slightly uneven. He reinforces every seam with a second pass. Then he cuts 2 strips from the remaining boar hide and sews them along the top and bottom edges of the sail as reinforcement. The points where the sail attaches to the mast and the boom, the points that will take the most tension. The hide is stiff, and the needle has to be driven through with a small stone as a hammer, but it goes. He holds the finished sail up against the afternoon light. Aki looks at it from across the camp. "That's going to hold. We need it to move us 600 kilometers, not win a race." He turns it over, checking the seams. "It'll hold long enough." On the second evening of construction, with 31 stems cut, lashed, and forming the beginning of a recognizable rectangular shape on the ground to the west of camp, Kai and Ray carry 5 of the finished but unattached stems down to the western bay to test buoyancy. The bay is everything Aki's map suggested. The rock arms on both sides kill the swell completely. The water inside is almost flat, shifting in long, slow oscillations rather than waves. The bottom is sandy and gradual. They wade into waist depth and set the 5 stems in the water, lashing them loosely side by side. The stems float for about 40 seconds, then, slowly, they settle. The waterline creeps up the circumference. In 2 minutes, the bundle is riding 3 centimeters lower than it started. In 5 minutes, it's riding 8 centimeters lower, which puts the top surface intermittently underwater in the tiny residual swell. Kai stands in the bay and watches this happen. Fresh cut, Nobu says from the bank. He's been watching with his arms folded. The internodal cavities in green bamboo retain significant moisture. As the air pressure equalizes with immersion, some of that moisture exits and reduces the internal air volume. He pauses. We need either 3 to 4 days of solar drying for these specific stems, or more stems to compensate for the lower buoyancy of the wet ones. Ray looks at the slowly sinking bundle. How many more? 20 stems of this quality would compensate sufficiently. 10 if we wait for partial drying. 2 days minimum. We already cut 31. Ray says, we need to cut 20 more. Ray doesn't say anything for a moment. Kai watches him look at the bundle in the water, at the darkening sky over the bay, at his own left hand, which he's been using less than he'd like because of the ribs, and which has developed a persistent tremor when he grips heavy objects too long. Then Ray wades out of the water, picks up the axe from the bank, and starts walking back up toward the bamboo stand. 20, he says without turning around. Fine. Nobu and Kai look at each other. His ribs? Kai says quietly. I know, Nobu says. He also knows he's still going. Kai watches Ray's silhouette move up the slope through the late light, axe over one shoulder, left arm held slightly out from his body to keep the ribs from compressing. He's slower than he was 4 days ago. He's still faster than anyone else. They follow him up. The raft frame takes shape on the ground to the west of camp, and every morning Kai walks around it and counts what's changed. Day 11, 22 stems lashed into 4 parallel rows, the crossbeams holding them in a rough rectangle that is beginning to look like something that could float. Day 12, 31 stems. The frame now fully outlined, the mast cradle mounted and tested. Day 13, 41 stems, one short of the target. The last one being the longest and driest in the harvest, reserved for the center where the load will be heaviest. The lashing is consuming rope at a rate that makes Kai slightly sick to look at. Every node point, every crossbeam junction, every brace, it all needs cordage, and the palm fiber they're producing goes directly from Aki's hands into Nobu's binding work within hours of being twisted. There is no reserve. The buffer between what they have and what they need is never more than 2 meters at any given moment. But the raft is becoming real. That matters in ways that are hard to quantify. Something changes in the camp when there's a physical object that represents the exit. Something that makes the work feel like it's aimed at something instead of just sustaining a situation that doesn't improve. Even Nobu, who doesn't usually respond visibly to non-quantifiable factors, looks at the frame on the evening of day 12 in a way that is not quite calculation. Kai notices this and says nothing. The defense upgrade happens in parallel, in the hours when the light is too low for fine raft work, but too early to sleep. Kai builds while the others rest. The new systems are different enough from the old ones that he has to think through each one from first principles, rather than adapting what he already has. The smoke barriers are Nobu's insight, delivered 4 days ago in the same quiet way. Nobu delivers most of his useful information, as an observation, not a recommendation, leaving the application to whoever is listening. I've noticed a pattern, he said at breakfast. Every time we've had a large fire, the bamboo cutting fires, the torch display during the second attack, they slow down at the perimeter, not because of the fire itself, the smoke specifically. They stop and assess when smoke is present in a way they don't, when there's only noise or light. Fear of fire is universal. Ray said, it's not fear of fire. They hunt with fire. I observed it from the pen. They use it for land clearing and to drive animals. They're not afraid of fire. But smoke seems to carry a different significance. He paused. Cultural taboo, possibly, or a practical association. Dense smoke in jungle means either a large fire or multiple fires, which suggests a large group of people. Either interpretation works in our favor. Kai spends 2 afternoons positioning 5 smoke stations around the camp perimeter. Each station is a pre-built pile, a dry tender core, a layer of slightly damp wood for sustained burn, and a thick layer of green leaves on top. The green leaves are what matters. Chlorophyll and moisture in fresh leaves produces thick white smoke, the kind that sits low and rolls outward rather than rising cleanly. To activate a station, he needs 1 lit match equivalent, a small prepared ember carried in a bamboo tube, and 30 seconds. 5 stations, 30 seconds each to activate. He walks the activation sequence until he can do it in under 3 minutes for all 5. The bamboo spike field takes 1 full day and most of his remaining energy for that day. The principle is simple and old. Sharpened stakes driven into the ground at an angle, points facing the direction of approach, concealed under a thin layer of loose vegetation, not deep enough to impale. These are 40-centimeter stakes, not punji pits. The tips come to a point sharp enough to penetrate boot leather which none of the hunters are wearing. A running foot coming down on a concealed spike at an angle takes the point across the sole and either stops the run or significantly alters it. He prepares 60 stakes over the course of the day, cutting and sharpening with a military knife, working in the shade to keep the noise down. Ray, whose ribs are improving but still limit axe work, helps drive them with a mallet improvised from a knotted root ball. The field covers the 3 primary approach corridors, 120 meters of spiked ground total. The liana net is the last element. He's used liana for triplins before, but this one is different. Not ankle height, but waist height. Multiple strands woven into a rough mesh across the gap between 2 trees at the main approach point. In full daylight, you'd see it at 15 meters. In jungle shadow, filtered light, at any kind of speed, it's invisible until you're in it. And once you're in a waist-height net at running speed, stopping is not a clean process. He tests it himself at walking speed. The net catches his forearms, then his chest, then his momentum carries his feet forward while the rest of him doesn't go with them. He goes down on both knees in the dirt, hard. Good, he says, getting up. Ao gives the alarm at 11 in the morning. Not his usual not the 2 short notes for humans or the 3 for the boar. This is continuous. A sustained rattling alarm call that Kai has never heard from him before, rising in pitch, repeated without pause. Ao launches from his perch and circles overhead 3 times before settling back. Kai steps outside and listens to the jungle. The birds have gone silent in a band that spans the entire northern approach simultaneously. Not the narrow sequential silencing that a small group moving carefully produces, but a wide, sudden, wall-to-wall silence that means many things moving through a wide area at the same time. Daytime, Nobu says from inside. He comes to the entrance. They change the approach time. How many? Nobu listens. More than before. They count as the sounds resolve and approach. Kai gets to 14 before the tribal movement pattern becomes clear. Not a single line but a broad front, spread across the full width of the northern approach in a way that is designed to prevent the funnel effect that has cost them people before. They're not walking into the bottleneck. They're bringing the entire front. 20 at least, Kai says. Maybe more. Ray is already at the smoke stations without being told, moving along the perimeter with the ember tube, kneeling at each pile. The first station catches in 20 seconds. White smoke rolls out low and thick, hugging the ground, pushing east in the morning breeze. The second station, third, fourth, fifth. By the time the last one is lit, there is a wall of white smoke across the entire northern approach, 60 meters wide, 2 to 3 meters tall, completely opaque in its densest section. The tribal advance stops. Kai can hear them. Voices not panicked, not retreating, but stopped. Discussion. He watches the smoke line from behind the liana curtain, holding the bow, counting seconds. 40 seconds. 1 minute. 2 minutes. They're still there. He can hear them. They haven't retreated. It's holding them. Ray says low for now. Kai says, 6 minutes. The smoke is still producing well from all 5 stations. Then at the 8-minute mark, the wind shifts. It happens gradually. A change in the canopy sound above them. The direction of leaf movement switching from east to southeast, and the smoke that was pushing away from camp begins pushing across it instead. Kai's eyes start watering. He pulls the liana curtain further aside to let the air move through. Wind changed, Aki says. I know. 3 minutes later, the wall of smoke has dissipated enough that the northern approach is visible through it. Not clear, but penetrable, and the 20 hunters who have been waiting, patient and unhurried on the other side, begin to move. They're not running, they're walking. Spread wide, moving carefully with long sticks probing the ground ahead of them. Specifically probing the ground. They know about the spike field. Kai watches 2 of them find spikes in quick succession. Both stop abruptly, one hops backward on 1 foot. That's 2 down, but the others have seen where the probing sticks caught, and they adjust their routes, stepping wider, reading the ground. A third hunter finds the liana net in exactly the way Kai expected. At a half run, both forearms into the mesh, the crash to ground, down. 2 more pile into him from behind before they can stop. 3 more down, but they're getting up. That leaves roughly 15 who have cleared all of the outer defenses and are approaching the camp core. Ray drops the probe stick he's been holding and picks up his spear. Kai knocks an arrow. The first hunter through the liana curtain gap meets Ray 2 steps past the entrance. Ray is bigger than anyone who has come through that gap, and his shoulder hits the hunter's shoulder at full force, which sends the hunter sideways into the root buttress of the overhang wall. Not pretty, not complicated. Physics. The second hunter circles to Ray's left. Kai has a clear shot from 8 meters, not at center mass at the upper arm of the spear-holding arm. The arrow hits the deltoid not deep. A glancing strike that draws blood and a sharp cry. The spear drops, the hunter grabs it with the other hand and looks at Kai with an expression that is not fear, but is a very clean recalculation. He backs up. 1 step. 2. The others behind him are watching Ray, who is already turning from the first hunter to face the second wave with the spear in both hands. Ribs be damned. Every bit of size he has making the overhang entrance look occupied in a way that does not suggest an easy passage. The retreat starts from the outside in, the hunters at the back of the formation going first, the ones who cleared the defenses following when it becomes clear that the core is not going to open up. 30 seconds later, the northern approach is empty. Kai stands at the entrance and watches the smoke thin and the jungle go back to its regular sounds. Nobu appears at his shoulder. Raft status, he says, before anything else. 70% complete. Lashing at 60 of the required 80 meters, mast and sail ready, rudder paddle not started. 2 more days, Kai says. 2 more days at current pace. A pause. Today cost us 4 hours of build time. I know, the next attack will be larger. They've found the spike field. They understand the net. They know the smoke is temporary. Nobu's voice is exactly the same as it always is. Not alarmed, not urgent, just factual. 20 became the number when 12 wasn't enough. The number after 20 is 30. Kai looks at what's left of the spike field. Half the stakes bent or pulled, the others still in place. The liana net is half torn. Fixable, but not quickly. 2 of the 5 smoke stations are spent. 30, he says. Maybe more. Yes. Aki has already started on the rudder paddle, splitting a wide flat board from a section of hardwood with the military knife and the mallet, the same tools they've been using for everything. The sound of the splitting is rhythmic, patient, efficient. 2 days. Kai says again, not a question this time. A perimeter. Inside that perimeter, the raft has to be finished and in the water. Outside it, the arithmetic stops working. 2 days, Nobu confirms, and picks up the rope he was twisting before the attack started. The raft is 90% complete and Kai is not sleeping. He sits at the camp entrance with the military knife across his knees and runs the inventory for the last time. Dried meat. 10 days at current consumption for 4 people, packed into the boar hide sacks and sealed with liana ties. Water, 20 liters in 7 bamboo containers, 5 to 6 days depending on heat and exertion. After that rain collection, the sail will function as a catchment surface, funneling runoff into the containers if the weather cooperates. The Pacific cooperates with rain roughly every 3 to 4 days in this latitude during the season. Roughly. Navigation. Nobu's compass needle in its palm fiber wrap, suspended from a thread tied to the mast when needed. The needle points north consistently. The Ogasawara Islands are north-northwest of their estimated position. 8 to 10 days of sailing at 3 to 4 kilometers per hour in consistent wind, which is the trade wind pattern for this region in this season, roughly. Tools. Both knives, both bows. 22 arrows remaining. The bone needle, the glass bottles, the copper wire. Everything that can be packed has been packed. Everything that can't be carried, they leave. 12 more hours, Nobu said at sunset, crouching over the stern, lashing with his hands working without his eyes needing to direct them. The mast mount final binding and the stern frame. 12 hours and it's ready to launch. 12 hours. Kai looked at the sky and did the calculation and said nothing. Ao cries at dawn. Not the alarm call, not the directional signal. Just crying, a long sustained sound that Kai hasn't heard from him before, repeated at intervals. While Ao circles above the camp in wide arcs, landing briefly on the overhang lip, and then launching again. Kai watches him from the ground. The wing is fully healed, has been for days, the flight is clean, no compensation, no favoring of the right side. He could go anywhere on this island or off it. He is a wild bird on a Pacific island, surrounded by the kind of habitat his species evolved for. And there is no reason at all why he should still be here. I never told you to stay, Kai says. Ao lands on the overhang lip and looks at him. The splint came off 2 weeks ago. You just didn't leave. Ao makes the short one-note sound. Not alarm. Just acknowledgement. Kai looks at him for a moment longer, then goes back to sharpening the arrow that doesn't need sharpening. They come at 2 in the morning. 30. Kai counts them as carefully as the darkness allows, and gets to 27 before the formation spreads too wide to track individually. 30 is a reasonable estimate, more than twice the number from the last attack. Wide front, the way they came last time, no funnel. And this time they are not slowing for the smoke. The 5 stations ignite on schedule, the wall of white rolling out across the northern approach, The line of hunters walks into it, stops for perhaps 45 seconds, then keeps coming. Kai watches them enter the smoke from behind the liana curtain and understands immediately that the calculation has changed. They have decided, whatever the smoke means to them culturally or practically, whatever instinct made them hesitate before, they have overridden it. 30 hunters in smoke and darkness are a committed force, and a committed force of 30 against 4 people with 2 bows and 1 functional spear is not a defense problem anymore. It's a physics problem, and the physics says, leave. Move, he says. Not loud, flat. The others are already reading the situation. Nobu has the compass needle in his pocket, and the water containers stacked and tied. Aki has the bow and the supply pack. Ray is at the front of the raft, hands on the first roller log waiting. The raft rolls on round logs positioned under the hull. Nobu designed this 3 days ago, when it became clear that 4 people could not carry 200 kilograms of bamboo and lashing across 200 meters of uneven jungle ground. 8 roller logs, each about 40 centimeters in diameter, placed perpendicular to the direction of travel. When the front of the raft passes over a roller, someone picks up the log from behind and runs it to the front. The raft moves in a continuous caterpillar of rolling contact theory. Now practice. Push, Kai says. Ray puts his weight into the stern. Aki and Nobu push from the sides. Kai pulls from the front with a liana rope looped around the bow crossbeam. The raft moves slowly. 3 centimeters, 5, 10, and then the rolling contact engages, and the resistance drops, and it is moving. Not fast, but moving. Behind them, the noise at the camp perimeter is getting louder. The smoke has not stopped them. The spike field will slow them. Each stake that connects is 1 person delayed, 1 person limping, 1 person out of the formation. The liana net is repaired enough to catch 2 or 3 more. The falling log was reset this morning and will catch whoever triggers it. Maybe 4 minutes of advantage. Maybe 5. The path to the bay is 200 meters. Kai mapped it on the day they decided to launch from the western shore, walked it 3 times, placed a spike field on the last 60 meters to cover the approach. There are no natural obstacles he hasn't accounted for. He knows every route, every soft patch, every place where the grade changes. Ray pushes, Kai pulls. The roller logs work. At the 40-meter mark, sounds behind them resolve into something specific. Voices at the camp perimeter, then closer, the sound of the falling log releasing, the crack, and the impact, and the cry, and then pursuit, running. Multiple people, moving faster than a raft on rollers. Torches, Kai says. Ray is already reaching for the bundle on the raft deck. He lights them from the ember tube one-handed, faster than should be possible for someone with bruised ribs and a 2-handed grip limitation, and begins throwing them sideways into the undergrowth along the path. Not at the pursuers, into the bushes on both sides at irregular intervals, so the path behind them becomes a corridor of small fires and smoke and disorientation, so that anyone running fast through jungle and darkness toward an unknown defensive position has to decide, at each new flame, whether it's a marker or a weapon. People running toward uncertain fire slow down. The spike field starts at 60 meters from the bay. Kai hears the first contact, a short broken cry, a change in the rhythm of pursuit. Second contact, closer to the left side. The pursuit is not stopped, but it is ragged individual people making individual decisions about where to put their feet. The ground slopes down to the bay, and the raft accelerates slightly on the grade. The last roller engages, and they're on the sand. 30 meters of sand between the tree line and the water. All in, Kai says. They pull the raft into the shallows. The water catches the hull, and the resistance drops to almost nothing. The raft is buoyant, riding correctly, the stern not dragging. Nobu steps onto the deck first, checking balance distribution as he moves to his position. Aki is next, the supply pack already aboard. Ray wades into waist depth, turns, sets the pole against the sandy bottom. Kai looks back at the tree line. The first hunters are emerging from the smoke and the underbrush onto the sand. 30 meters away, he counts 4, 5, then more behind them, moving fast. The first arrows come visible in the moonlight as they arc over the shallows, falling short by 10 meters, by 8, by 6 as the archers find range. He steps onto the raft. Push, he says to Ray. Ray pushes. The pole bends under the force of his full weight and functional arm, and the raft moves out of the shallows into deeper water. Ray pulls twice more, each time the depth increasing, until the third pull goes in and finds no bottom, and he pulls it up and lets the current take them. On the beach, 30 hunters stand at the water's edge. They shoot. 4 arrows come at once, and 3 of them reach the raft. 2 hit the hull with a flat thump. 1 passes over the deck between Kai and Nobu. Nobu does not move. Kai does not move. The next volley falls short. The sail catches wind. Kai watches the island recede. The hunters on the beach are visible for longer than he expects. The bay is sheltered and the raft's departure is slow at first, the wind building gradually as they clear the rock arms and enter open water. He watches the figures on the sand grow smaller. He watches the tree line above them, and somewhere in those trees, the camp under the overhang, the fire pit, the storage hole, the signal net they'll leave behind for no one. 14 days. He did the count this morning and got to 14. Ray sits down on the hull beside him. The raft shifts slightly with his weight. He doesn't say anything for a while. Harada, what? In school I laughed at you. I know. A pause. You cut bamboo for 12 hours straight and didn't complain. Neither did you. Another pause longer. We're even, he says. Ao from the top of the mast screams once at the open ocean. The full alarm call, both notes, maximum volume, pointed at nothing in particular, then settles into his feathers and goes quiet. The island is a dark line on the horizon, then a suggestion, then nothing. 600 kilometers of open Pacific in every direction, a bamboo raft with a sail made of 4 shirts, 4 people with 2 bows and 20 arrows and a compass needle on a thread, and somewhere at the far end of a line drawn north-northwest, the Ogasawara Islands and whatever comes after them. The sail pulls, the raft moves. Kai wraps the compass thread around the mast, checks the heading, and settles in for the long part. The compass needle points northwest and the wind is behind them. Nobu checks the heading at sunrise, holding the thread at arm's length, waiting for the needle to settle. 3 seconds. He reads it, looks at the horizon, reads it again. We're on course, he says. Wind is consistent. Speed, difficult to estimate exactly, but the wave pattern relative to our hull suggests 3 to 4 kilometers per hour. Time to Ogasawara, Kai asks. Nobu sits down and works the arithmetic on the raft deck with a wet finger. 500 to 600 kilometers. At this speed, 5 to 8 days. The range depends on wind consistency and any current correction we need to make. 5 to 8 days. Kai looks at the water containers, does his own count. Food for 10 days. Water for 5-6 with rationing, potentially more if the rain comes. The sail is a catchment surface. He's already rigged the lower edge to channel runoff into the widest container when it rains. We have enough, he says, probably. Nobu says, which from Nobu is nearly the same as yes. The first problem announces itself an hour after sunrise. The stern lashing, one of the crossbeam poles at the back of the raft, has developed movement. A 1/4 centimeter of flex. Each time a small swell passes under the hull, the lashing giving slightly where 2 of the binding points are working against each other. It's not critical. It will become critical if the flex continues and the fibers fatigue. Ray is on it before Kai finishes looking at it. He takes the remaining palm fiber from the supply pack, adds 4 wraps to the joint, drives a wedge of split bamboo into the gap between the pole and the crossbeam, and ties it off. The flex stops. Good, Kai says. Ray sits back and holds his ribs. Still good, he says. Ao is on Kai's shoulder. He's been there most of the morning. Not restless, not alarmed, just sitting. Occasionally he looks at the water below the raft edge with what appears to be professional interest. Once briefly he launches and circles the raft twice at low altitude before landing back on the same shoulder. Kai thinks about the island, the overhang, the fire pit, the signal net strung between the roots, the bore pit, the splice in the first bow where the wood cracked, and he wrapped it with sinew, and it held. 14 days of things built by hand out of whatever the ground offered. The ocean is nothing like that. The ocean is the same in every direction, and it gives you nothing. No roots, no bamboo, no flat stone for calculations. The threats on the island were specific. You could see them, hear them, prepare for them, build something to stop them. Out here, the threat is the water itself. The scale of it, the fact that 200 kilometers in any direction there is only more ocean, and the raft is 4 meters long. On the island there was always a tree to climb. He keeps thinking about this. On the island when the board charged, there was a tree 12 meters away, and he made it in time. Out here, there is no tree. There's nowhere to go that is not also ocean. Ao shifts on his shoulder. Yeah, Kai says. I know. The ship appears on the second evening, 40 minutes before full dark. Nobu sees it first. He's been watching the horizon in the systematic way. He watches everything. A slow scan, left to right, repeated at intervals. The same patient methodology he applies to all information gathering. He goes still for a moment before he speaks. Kai. One word. Kai reads the weight of it before he's finished turning. They are northeast of their position, maybe 6 kilometers. A shape on the horizon that is too angular and too consistent to be a wave or a cloud. A vessel, medium-sized, not large. Too far to make out detail, but the silhouette has the unmistakable geometry of a built thing. Flat, horizontal lines. A superstructure above the hull. Ray is on his feet immediately. Signal, we signal, white fabric, maximum visibility, wave and shout. Kai's hand closes on his forearm. Wait. Ray stops, looks at him. Kai watches the ship. It is not moving the way a ship moves when it has somewhere to go. The heading is not consistent. There's a slow drift in the course, a gradual arc that is not a navigation line, but a search pattern. It is also not moving at the speed a vessel runs in open water when it's making passage. It's moving slowly, carefully, and there are no lights. The sun is 40 minutes from the horizon. Running lights come on at dusk. Every vessel, every flag, every size. It is not a rule that anyone who knows the water ignores. The ship has no running lights. Nobu says it before Kai finishes thinking it. That's not a rescue vessel. Quiet, not alarmed. Just the fact, delivered in the same voice as the raft calculation. A rescue ship would be moving faster, would be running lights at this hour, would have Coast Guard markings visible at this range. Aki is looking at it. Then what is it? Nobody answers. The ship's course changes slowly over the space of 2 minutes. The silhouette shifts, the angle of it relative to them changing, the bow turning toward them. Not coincidence, not a course correction for weather or traffic. A turn toward a specific point on the water, toward the raft. On the ship's deck, a light comes on, then another. Floodlights, the kind mounted on a swivel, powerful enough to throw a beam across open water. One of them sweeps in a long, slow arc across the surface, and Kai watches it move, watches it track, watches it converge. 2 knives, 1 bow, Ray's bow, the stronger one, 11 arrows, 4 people on a 4-meter raft made of bamboo and boar hide, and 4 shirts sewn together in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, with nowhere to go that is not also ocean. The floodlight finds the raft. It stops. The beam is on their faces. White, flat, completely revealing. And on the other end of it, 6 kilometers away on the deck of a ship with no flag and no running lights, something that has been looking for them has found them. 14 days on the island. Every hour of it, the fire, the snake, the pit, the tribe, the raft, the escape. He thought he was past the worst of it. He thought the ocean was the last obstacle and the far side of it was home. The light doesn't move. He was wrong.